because wow. Got it. Welcome everybody to, oh geez, I don't even know. Is it episode 27? It is. It's Hash Church 3.0, episode 27. And all I have to do quickly is grab the link. I'm going to grab the link and send it over to the folks that are in the wrong one. Because for whatever reason, when I create a YouTube link and then I go live, it creates a totally different one. So awesome. I just want to welcome the few people that have arrived already. We got the Dragonfly Earth Medicine in the house. We got Mr. Skunkman Sam in the house, who, God, it was a while ago, but you celebrated a birthday, didn't you?
Me?
Yeah.
No, my birthday's in July.
Okay, well, what was it? I thought I missed something. I feel like I missed something that was some months ago. So much has happened. People have passed away and people have celebrated birthdays, and there's all sorts of things going on in the world right now, and I can't really keep up, but hopefully you guys are all doing really well over in Amsterdam and over in the Coot.
Although things are blowing up here, they had riots in the Delft last night, and they had riots in Rotterdam because a lot of people, they don't want to be vaccinated, but yet they want to be able to freely travel. And they're demonstrating to the point of extremity.
Damn. Yeah, it's going on all over right now.
Yeah, I heard that a lot of people are not necessarily, out there in the streets because they're against vaccines. They're out there in the streets because they're against the mandates.
Which is a big difference.
There's a lot of people who are fully vaccinated who are against the mandates. And I think there's a really big difference between being pro-choice and then being mandated. So I think that's what a lot of people are upset about.
And then there's a lot of Dutch anarchists who just like to stir up shit.
And for that, we're thankful.
Well, unless they're harming things, and that's not cool. We understand.
No, exactly. I just changed my mic because someone told me I sounded like a phone call. So hopefully that's a little bit better there. Johnny B's coming in. You guys might not recognize Johnny B. There's only 2/3 of Johnny B that used to be here. I think he's lost like 70 pounds or some ridiculous thing, rocking the push-ups, rocking the sit-ups, doing the walking and the healthy eating. Johnny fucking B in Toronto at Lyft. Dude, you do your push-ups today or what? You're muted.
I'm 50 done. I'm down. I'm
nice.
finished.
Nice.
I did 15 push-ups in front of the Rogers Center. I did 15 push-ups in front of the CN Tower. Then I did another 15 push-ups overlooking the CN Tower and everything else, and then I did another 10. So I'm past that point. I feel fantastic. Good morning, everybody.
Well, what I like about it is that means I don't have to do any exercise. You did it for me.
See, that's the whole idea.
You got me going. You got me going, Johnny. I've been doing 50 push-ups for the last 10 days or however long it's been since you challenged me.
It's a 50-day challenge. We're pushing into 2022 with just a new push of life. And you know what? A little healthiness, a little bit of exercise, just nothing major, just 50 a day. You can do 5, 10 times a day, 5 times a day. I'm up to 18, and then I have to break, and then I can do another 5 and 3. That's my max. And I have to rest.
Well, your timing is perfect, brother, because we were just kind of talking about something we probably won't get too deep in talking to today because it's such a triggering and divisive conversation. But I love that you came in right at the time to show people that, during this hectic kind of crazy time, there are other ways to improve one's health, which is to focus on what you put in your mouth, what you breathe into your lungs, what you put into your mind, because consuming CNN all day isn't the healthiest of things to do. And just kind of figuring out other ways to be healthy and happy and kind of going down that pathway, Johnny B. And no one can deny
morning
that
walks.
You've been doing it.
Yeah, morning walks, guys.
Sorry. On that, I wanted to tell you guys that we're on
Alec Dixon,
day 7 of our liquid cleanse of a 20-day cleanse right now. So we're on day 7 of our liquid cleanse, and it's been totally amazing. Like, you know, talk about changing your frequency and upping your health and really stimulating your immune stimulus response. It's like once you start getting rid of digestion, then you reach an entire whole level of healing and immune boost. So it's been really great over here too. And I love it that we're talking about health and well-being. And Johnny B, way to go, buddy.
Big up,
We've
Johnny
been
B.
doing 10-minute planks for
5. We do
5
5
minutes
minute
and then
planks.
another.
We do
That's
5.
awesome.
What we do is and I'll tell you this really quick. Alec Dixon, big love to you.
Yeah, welcome, Alec, bro. Long
Hi,
time.
Alec.
But I do
buddy.
like elbows, then 30 seconds arm, others arm, then in the plank, elbows, and then do 30 push-ups. And it's gnarly, and you do it to the song Twait, song. So it's a 6-minute workout. And I can do it with a doobie in my mouth. I can do the whole thing smoking a doobie in my mouth, and that makes me stoked. So I'm with you. I'm with you on the weed workouts and the feeling good, because I'm 48. I'm going to be 50 soon. So
what? That's good to hear.
And
That
I'm
you're
well
staying
into my
healthy.
And you guys
Important
look
to stay
great.
healthy.
So I take advice health-wise from people that look healthy. I remember this giant man one time in Amsterdam giving me health advice, and I was kind of like, dude, like, no offense, but like, I can't take health advice from someone that's clearly not showing me a healthy lifestyle. And you guys are definitely looking good for any age, let alone for, you know, getting into the 50s and stuff. That's awesome. Welcome to Dr. Mark Scaldone and the cats down under the stars.
Hey, everybody.
Dude, one of my
I got my
favorites.
very soon.
Couldn't miss it.
So this guy.
Did we invite Jonah Hill onto the show today? Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm bummed they didn't pick me.
Dude, I seen some funny shit. I seen someone say that Iggy Pop is going to be playing Naked Guy on the pole. Remember that? Do you remember Naked?
I was talking to Sunshine Kesey at the last Oregon Country Fair, and they like reconnected with that guy.
Yeah, he's really healthy. He's
he's
super
totally good.
great. He's like a super good guy out in the woods of Oregon still.
That's so good. That is so good. Oh my God.
Did he ever think when he was up on that pole on that fretful day that he would be known infamously as the naked guy on the pole at the Veneta show?
Every deadhead in the world is like, oh yeah, naked guy on the pole. Yeah, that guy.
What was
Pop's
he on?
playing him.
Oh my God. Right?
Dude, I don't know. I feel like he hung out with
I don't know,
Bear
but I
like,
want
right before
some.
that show.
Well, it was hotter than hell that day.
That
So
was
there were a lot of
family.
naked people in the audience, and just so that he got. Right. But there are hundreds of naked people there that day, I think. I'm pretty sure.
There were 20,000 people there that day, and minimal cars in the parking lot because everyone hitchhiked out on buses to the country fair that year.
Because there was the gas prices were so incredibly high.
They charged $3 to get into the show.
And the crazy thing is that there was no water. So when we talked to everybody who ran that show, they were trying to literally bring in water by gallon jugs.
It was 110
milk
degrees.
jugs, and it was like over 105 degrees. It was totally insane. So yeah, naked people galore.
Well, and they were supposed
Big
to be
time.
making money for the Springfield Creamery, which is Ken Kesey's brother, Chuck Kesey, who started the Springfield Creamery, the very first yogurt with probiotics in America. Chuck Kesey, Nancy's Yogurt. They were trying to do a benefit for the Springfield Creamery in 1972. That's what that show's about. They didn't make any money because they only charged $3 a ticket, but I'm pretty sure the dad gave them $10,000 afterwards, and obviously the business is still going and everything. And I love that the kids getting licked in the face by the dog, the dirty ass kids getting licked in the face by the dog. We also, those kids around. So lots of love,
They
you know.
came back in 82, right? They did another one 10 years later in 82, didn't they?
Classic 1982 show, of course, so good.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I have the songs playing in my head right now.
Yeah,
And,
that was out at
they were
Dead
also
Tower as well, out at the Oregon Country Fair.
out in
So,
the parking lot,
and then they
not
tried
in the
to do
fair.
it,
They did
and
in
then
the
they
parking lot.
and then they tried to do it again in 92, and we were all set, ready to do it. And I was going to help be backstage manager.
Jerry got
And
sick,
we had a
yeah.
whole bunch of Oregon Country Fair running that. But then Jerry got, he went into a coma. So
No,
everything was
No,
canceled.
he got sick, but there was also, he hurt his hand, I think, scuba diving.
Mainly, but
Scuba diving, but he also actually was sick then too.
Yeah, he got really sick.
he was super sick. And then the first show that he, the Halloween show at Oakland, Jerry Garcia band, Oakland Coliseum, 1992. So
There was no
he
better
didn't smoke
show.
one cigarette during the whole show,
Yeah.
which has never happened, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just, anyone should go listen to that show. He basically tore the roof off, and we were roller skating in the parking lot, right? Because you roller skate from one side to the other at the Oakland shows, because the basement, this is too much information for everyone now, but the guy at the top between used to play wine glasses with water in them, and it sounded like an organ, because he would put his hands on the wine glasses with water at different levels, and he would play
At the bridge.
total songs on the wine glasses. It was kind of spectacular.
Fucking
Hippie
hippies,
trick.
I just love them all.
Big up, Colin. You're awesome. We've been seeing you on our
So
lives
good.
doing the health things and stuff. Love you.
Big love, guys.
Yeah, welcome, Colin.
Big love. Thanks for having me. I'm in sunny California right now. I'm smack dab in down in Venice, in that area right now.
Oh,
So
okay.
just thanks, man. Just here setting up this lab and getting things cranking, and it's exciting but stressful times. You know.
I'm gonna jump out of here, guys. Peace and love. Hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again.
Yeah, if you want to
Okay.
jump in on Lyft, if there's some good stuff, Johnny B, just jump in on your phone later.
I'm gonna jump on down there, and then I'm jumping in my car for a nice little 419 kilometers away, 4 hours and 20 minutes. I'm trying to get there for 7:10 for an awesome dinner. So that's my drive today.
When's your birthday, brother?
Right now. 50 years of
Happy
being awesome,
birthday,
brother.
Johnny B.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
Happy
dude.
birthday, Johnny.
Yeah.
I'm having just an awesome day today. I did my 50 push-ups today. I've just accomplished so many things I wanted to today, and now I'm on a 419 kilometer drive. And you know, Mark, I love the number 419, so because that's 1 minute warning before 420. So I'm just off for a beautiful day, and then I get to spend 5 days of smoking hash. That's all we're smoking. I got everybody's hash across the country waiting for me to try and just to enjoy and indulge in. And you'll be seeing it through the Instagram posts all week of all the different greatness I get to try from all you guys under there making amazing products. And it's just so rewarding being here at Lyft. And the amount of people, Mark, and the amount of people who have been shouting out Hash Church and have learned. One guy came down this morning having breakfast, goes, I watched you and Mark and everybody on Hash Church. He had some rare disease. He makes his own bubble. He gave me some rosin to try. Everything has changed his life. You know what? Hash Church changes people's lives. You guys are awesome. And I love you all. And we'll see you. So I'm excited, as you can see. I'll see you
Have a
soon.
great day, Johnny B.
Thanks,
We'll be
guys. You
thinking
guys
of ya.
rock. I'm thinking of you guys
Looking
all the
good,
time.
Johnny. Happy birthday, buddy. You're the best. Thanks for the
Happy birthday,
inspiration.
man.
72 pounds lighter today, guys. That's your morning walks, dedication, and committing to what you want. Never give up, never surrender, and you'll get what you want in life. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace, Johnny B. That guy's a fucking inspiration. I gotta say. Just
He's
a
the man.
good dude all around. I knew it was his birthday, like in the near future, because when I first met the guy, I met him in Amsterdam, and he was like, and I think I met him on his birthday, like today, like in 2012 or whatever. And so, yeah, that's awesome. Good that we can all kind of celebrate Johnny B's birthday, maybe with a little dab. I think we got all sorts of good things here. I'm going to load up the Dustin Revere little terp slurper.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, this is our 11th year, deep kind of in tenure with SC Labs. And so, yeah, I mean, it's never a dull moment. It's been, one of the most educational, it has been by far the most educational experience of my life. But yeah, lots of fascinating trends. I'm super stoked to be part of this conversation today. Hope everybody's doing really wonderful.
So is it nice? Is it sort of a different fall for SC Labs right now? Hey, you guys
Well,
work
so
really good.
this is our 10th harvest kind of season, and as a laboratory, each harvest year really kind of puts a lab's capabilities, as far as quality once things get busy, and so 10 years incremental progress, each harvest we've been able to optimize a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, we have like lab staff that run 7 days a week, 5 days a week. We have an overnight shift, so we've just kind of we just moved our entire system to like a 2-day rush, 3-day standard turnaround. So, kind of just working on optimizing, standardizing.
Yeah, I was actually talking about the Emerald Cup samples, just that you guys aren't over inundated with that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that right now for sure. Yeah, well, so the Emerald Cup kind of entry window is the month of January. So that's when samples or entries will be entered for the Emerald Cup. And then we are also kind of right in the middle of doing testing for the California State Fair. So the California State Fair, from November 1st to March 1st is there's an entry window open for flowers across categories from sun-grown, mixed light to indoor. And yeah, essentially everything is really primarily based off the data for testing this year. There's not, it's just such an ordeal to run a contest and to have, judges that entries are distributed to. And so the State Fair this year, they were originally going to do an indica category and a sativa category, but they kind of caught wind of this cool kind of terpene classification work we've been doing, and with the Emerald Cup. And so essentially everything's going to be tested and sorted into the primary terpene archetypes, and then judged head up against each other. So, Jack, Trainwreck, Sage, Durban, everything terpenoline will be judged against terpenoline. And then the things that really weigh the winners are going to be around total terpene content and the cannabinoid. So really like celebrating the diversity of what this plant represents on a terpene level, as well as, kind of helping to, push and educate around these kind of other metrics, to help determine and judge quality beyond, this THC number that everybody's so focused on. But, I think in the future, kind of total terpene content, and then, what the cannabinoid to terpene ratio is really going to be one of the more important metrics that, people use to understand both, quality as well as how well something, how well terpenes have been preserved in it. And then also how well that entourage effect kind of influence is going to happen from that ratio of cannabinoid to terpene,
So are you guys going to be testing for the new sulfur containing compounds that were recently discovered?
Yeah.
I don't think they were new personally.
Yeah, they're not
just
new.
my statement.
I agree
People
with
have
that,
known
yeah.
about them for a long time. Nick
I
Ziegler
agree
said
with
he's
that.
known for 25 years. He sent me that
Thiols
paper and
and
was
sulfur.
like, whoa, that's like, we studied that 25 years ago. He said the beer industry has such a deep understanding of these thiols and thioates that it's not even funny how much more we have to learn in cannabis.
Well, that's because they don't like them.
Well, they study them big time.
Yeah, but
I mean,
they study them to avoid them.
no, that's not true. Not Yakima Chief Hops anyway, and not the work that Nick Ziegler did. They were the one company that, instead of trying to avoid their unique differences, they decided to celebrate them. And so that's why Nick did all the work he did with thiols and thioates and esters. 1,440 thiols he discovered alone in hops, which I've invited him here today because it would be amazing to have him here on this conversation, because we have kind of been discussing lately about trying to get a group together that can discuss these things, kind of maybe create a shared lexicon and create this sort of sensory evaluation program that we can all kind of, feed into to create something that could take us away from, you know, these COAs that are basically simply THC and terpenes.
Yeah,
Well,
here.
I-
Sorry.
No problem. I'm really curious. We've been studying these for a long time. We've been aware of them, of course, for a very long time. But it'll be very interesting to see how many of them are found in cannabis. How many did you just say? 200 or 400 in hops?
1,440 is what he said when he
Jesus
came on.
Christ.
Church.
If there's that many in cannabis, then think about it. And especially if they act synergistically with cannabinoids like THC, it's everything just got way more complex.
Way more complex. And when you think of, like, at least from what Nick was saying, he was suggesting that some of these thiols are responsible for the shift in the modulation of the profile. And so most people aren't even paying attention to these compounds right now. We're sort of on the surface with cannabinoids and terpenes. So it's exciting that the rabbit hole goes deeper and that there are people like you guys on the panel who will jump right in with both feet into that rabbit hole. So I appreciate you all for that.
Excuse me, Alex, for interrupting.
Oh, no, please. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
no.
Sorry, I was just gonna say we've been doing a ton of decarbing in the house and just like putting together this amazing salve. And the decarbing has been really in the upper floors of the house has been like full on like terpene haven. And it's been a really interesting experiment because we've got 2 cats. And the cats are fully addicted to the 3rd floor of the house where the terpenes are the most predominant.
The collection chamber.
It's like the collection chamber. And they're only getting terpenes and they're walking around acting so totally crazy on all of the Persian rugs. They're like differentiating all of the different colors on the rug.
Fractaled out on the carpets.
They're getting fractaled out super high just on the terpenes. So just wanted to.
That's awesome. And one thing I was just going to add, kind of, to Sam's question, original question on the thiols. Yeah, so we've known about thiols for quite some time. Really, Nick Ziegler put it that much more on my map from the work that they've done on hops with testing thiols. We've been working on kind of a method to kind of be able to start adding certain sulfuric type compounds. So we are kind of going to be developing to that direction, but even without kind of thiols to help do the really fine nuance sorting towards the end of all the different subgroupings that happen, we have found that tracking the primary mono and sesquiterpenes and using them as a tool to sort kind of can really capture, for the most part, all the primary smells or groups. But yeah, I think once you start getting into thiols and some of these other trace compounds, that really kind of defines some of the nuance of how the subgroupings kind of open up. There's so much more to be kind of to be learned from that, and definitely really excited for it.
They're extremely potent. They're extremely potent. I mean, the human olfactory senses are very tuned to these molecules at extremely low concentrations. So that they put an odorant in natural gas because natural gas has no odor at all. And I think what they're putting in natural gas,
mercaptan,
is butane thiol. And so you can imagine that these things are basically sensitive at really, I think it's like almost part per trillion levels.
Right.
So the human olfactory is so sensitive to those that these things could be in there in just very, very trace quantities, fleeting quantities that essentially make them not quantifiable or not measurable on a GC, but you could certainly taste the difference when you consume it.
Does anybody know if these compounds do they modulate THC or do they potentiate THC? Anybody know?
I have a feeling Nick knows, but he's not here yet. And I have invited him. And welcome to Wook Sauce, who is in the house. with Girls in Green. Booyaka.
How's it going? Alice will be here shortly.
I knew she would if she wasn't.
Yep, just handling some stuff with the Delpos.
Gearing up for Legends of Hash?
I am. I'm waiting patiently for my jars to get here so I can get everything packed up and send it on down with the homies to get the entries in and stuff. I'm pretty excited. It's gonna be a good event.
Dude, I'm not even going and I'm pretty excited. I got to admit, the amount of energy that Addison and Kevin have put into this and the stuff that they've kind of organized around it. I mean, getting Calyx jars for Legends of Hash was like, it's just so much different and grown out from what we created it as. And I'm pretty excited that they've maintained the integrity. They've said no to all sorts of companies that tried to sponsor because Legends just didn't line up with those companies. And I thought that was amazing as well. So I kind of got to give those guys a shout out for really doing a great job. I can't wait for the event to get here.
Me too. I'm stoked. Can't wait to meet all the hash makers that end up going. Everyone that I've seen is going. It's pretty amazing and it's going to be a great night. I'm excited.
Hell yeah, absolutely. I'm freezing up a little bit. So when you guys notice me freeze up, just kind of keep talking as you do. I've got the beta Elon Musk Starlink internet going on, and we get a little cut out here and there. So have patience with me, everyone.
Fair enough. We'll jump
Yeah,
in.
up with that.
And Flynn, I was just wondering, you might be still be around or not, but I was just wondering what some of the strains you might be putting in to the event, or just bringing some strains. Or how about this, Alec? What are some new trends and smells and flavors that you're seeing out of the farms this year that are kind of dominating or just kind of going off this year?
Well, what's dominating is definitely that caryophyllene limonene like pair, like the caryophyllene limonene co-balance, kind of all the desserts that in the Emerald Cup last year, we saw that profile was about 54% of all the entries across categories. And the popularity of that profile hasn't really slowed down. And so I would, believe it to be closer to 65% of the cannabis grown in California. It's probably that profile or close to it. So, you do see the homogeneity of profiles that's kind of happening as people are just like kind of chasing the THC number, and kind of going for these caryophyllene dominant type caryophyllene limonene combos. It's an amazing profile, but it's also the most over kind of grown profile at this point. So that's kind of where I'm really excited for kind of the work we do with the Emerald Cup, and then what we're doing this year with the State Fair, which is kind of presenting cannabis to a whole new audience of cannabis novice people, to kind of really show the range of diversity of what this plant offers, and kind of honor it in that way, so that kind of it's not just kind of the popularity bias doesn't just kind of sweep the cup and then have a that much more of an effect on homogenizing the herb in the market.
Very good.
Our early research showed that limonene definitely potentiated THC and modulated the effects, but caryophyllene did not particularly modulate. But that's a different issue that I'm talking about.
Sam, I had a quick question on that. I'm curious as to like, how you kind of controlled some of those variables. Did you take strains that were high in these, terpene profiles?
No,
we equal like balance kind of
we got pure THC. We got pure THC.
Okay.
25 milligrams, put it in a volcano every time, and then we spiked it with just a single terpene. So
when I did that experiment at your house, I did it through a Ruhr bong.
Okay, yeah, well, I used roars a few times, you're right. But mostly what we used was those thick, like Brillo pad things that were available with the volcano. And we measured it out with a very precise scale, and we vaped them all identically. And pure, pure THC gets you high, but with the right terpenes, you get way higher.
How much terpene did you add?
Oh, as small as we could add. A really tiny spot. I mean, we were using pipettes, the smallest ones we had, and we made it so that they were really, really tiny amounts.
Well, and something I would mention too, that's where I feel like in the future, there's such value in this idea of the cannabis terp ratio, right? Because what we see, 5 of the 6 primary terpenes in cannabis are monoterpenes, which begin to boil off at room temperature. So they're therefore the biggest spoilage indicator of, cannabis that's lost its terpene content, right? And, and so much of what we see in the state in California, a farmer puts their best foot forward, and has all the controls to preserve terpenes in their supply chain to the point where they pass it off. But then it goes to a distributor, and in the possession of the distributor in their chain of custody, it pretty much loses 60-80% of the terpene content that was there. And, in a lot of ways is indistinguishable to the eye,
It's a two-sided coin though, Alex, because for example, terpenes, you're right, the monoterpenes can be incredibly volatile, and significant amounts can be lost between a living plant at harvest and 2 weeks later, or even a month later after curing, etc. But the truth of it is, I found that cannabis is fresh. It's been dried for 2 weeks. It could theoretically be smoked, but it's really super fresh. That I found some really high terpene content stuff actually gives me laryngitis.
Well, and I think, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. So I think some of the more volatile ones, you have to be careful about extreme amounts of. And I got laryngitis every year for like 5 or 6 years in a row when I was living in California growing herb. And
Wow.
then I moved over here and started making dry sift, and I never got laryngitis again.
Well, the one thing I was going to mention, and Sam, you're very right. I think that's where, kind of translation from smell to flavor and the character of a profile, how it kind of translates to smoke. I mean, certain examples of an awesoming dominant strain kind of singe your throat, and so I think, there's a lot there to what you're saying, but my main point around this cannabis terp ratio, right? Because so much of what we see is, the average of terpene content in flower across everything we've ever tested, over 200,000 samples, is like 1.4% average. Whereas the potential of what we see whenever it's done most optimally is 3 to 5.5% in dried flower. So, so from what we see, the market average of terpene content in flower is 100% to 200%
majority
less.
of that, do you think the majority of that low 1.5% is driven by genetics or by growing or processing, or all three?
I think all three. Yeah, I think all three for sure.
Okay.
But the big point that I was just going to make, right, is, if you had, just speaking in terms of this idea of the entourage effect and the nuanced uniqueness that strains have to offer whenever they are preserved, right? Because, if you had a strain that tested like legitimately 35% THCA, but it was dried and cured like shit and it smells like hay and it has 0.2% terpene content, that's like a 90-to-1 cannabinoid to terpene ratio, right? And in my opinion, that's in the future what really defines biomass, right? There's no other value for that to be represented as a flower for connoisseur consumption purposes,
it's handy
or
for
for
isolating THC.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and so in an instance where all the terpene content is gone and the 90-to-1 cannabis terp ratio is there, there's not really an entourage effect that's going to be present, whether if the terpene was originally terpenoline to make it more stimulating or creative, or if it was higher in myrcene it doesn't really matter anymore because it's 90-1. So it's kind of absent terpene or entourage. And so really it's just a very THC base effect, so it's like the most value for that would be to distill it and, add terpenes or something at the end. But from what we see, right, like, kind of you could have a strain, say, that has 15% THC, but it was dried and cured immaculately, like with terpene preservation and ultimate like kind of focus, and it might have 3 to 5.5%, terpene content in dried flower. That's a 3-to-1 cannabinoid to terpene ratio, right? So whether that terpene was limonene, whether that terpene was terpinolene, whether that terpene was myrcene, right? That the significance and the uniqueness of that entourage effect can be pronounced, right? As opposed to that 90-to-1, right?
One other question with all this analysis, IDs that with they're not damaged samples, but they're done properly, and they're really primarily just one terpene.
I mean, with on certain on the end spectrums of the rainbow with terpinolene or with like myrcene, you see, so many examples where it's just really primary amounts of that one terp, with very subsequent, secondary or tertiary kind of terpene presence. But you'll see the vast majority of the representation of that profile would be a singular terpene. But so again though, in this example, I think kind of just the ratio is, I think, going to be one of the most important things. I'm sorry, I kind of like slightly like missed the point I was going to just hit on, but
no, that's perfectly all right.
Yeah, no, I can explain. I can explain why the ratio is important, is because what you're changing when you take freshly picked cannabis to dried cannabis is the amount of water that's in there. And so the relative percentage of terpenes to overall mass of plant changes drastically when you go from freshly frozen or freshly harvested cannabis to dried cannabis. And so because that ratio changes, the percent terpenes, which is the percent of the volatile terpenes versus everything else that's in there. Well, remember, you're wholesaling a whole lot of water out of there. So everything else that's in there, that denominator changes. That's why you have to pay attention to the ratio that Alec is talking about.
And that's, thank you for bringing that up, actually, because that totally triggered my mind, right? And so, because, and Sam, that's where I kind of was going to bring up, because I mean, I think the translation or carryover of like what total terpene content might have been present, kind of is totally dependent on, all these conditions, right? Like, time of, or temp, pictures are being harvested under. It's like if it's in the middle of the day versus the middle of the night, there's like 20% terpene content off the top just because of the heat of the sun and the temperatures you're harvesting under. So many people that harvest commercial cannabis, then like they harvest in the middle of the day and then they load box trucks up with masses of herb that then kind of sit for like 45 minutes to hours until they kind of get transported to a place where they can be put under temperature control conditions. But in so many ways, so much of what we see because of the volatilization of these, really precious monoterpenes, it's like cannabis really, in my opinion, believe it deserves a cold supply chain, a continuous cold supply chain, anywhere where it's going to be in the chain of custody of somebody that's caring for this perishable good, and in this record year of harvests in California and overproduction, I think it's very reminiscent of what happened in Oregon a couple of years back. And what really in a big way happened is, once everything goes to a standstill, it really becomes that much more apparent who has infrastructure and who doesn't have infrastructure to even have, what is the carrying capacity of your situation to preserve terpene content and what you're holding in your possession. Because if you don't have that ability, then you're kind of going to get like dusted, because in the time of the Great Flood, kind of the averages of the extremes in quality really start dividing. Because if the average is about 1.5% of the state, everything's sitting around, it kind of really goes down to about 1% or less. So then if you're at 3 to 5.5%, you're kind of dunking on fools, in a big way of just, I think, it's always that thing. If it's really bomb and it's really terp preserved and is bombing a room, it's always going to have the ability to fly. But if it's anything less than that, it's this commoditized cannabinoid race to the bottom game. So I think it's like those are the separate kind of sides of the market. It's like the commoditized cannabinoid market, and then those that are on the ultra side of, the terpene preservation game, and, just being able to immaculately care for what's in their possession.
Dude, you called it with the supply chain needing to be cold from start to finish. When I saw the cryo can come out, I thought, well, that's it. That if the cryo can isn't it, something exactly like it needs to be. It needs to be able to be rolled into the fields. It needs to be able to, very quickly and very cold remove and mitigate 90 or 85% of that biomass and just preserve the glandular trichome heads, in which case now that becomes your feed input for any process you're doing, whether you're doing CO2 extraction or butane extraction or water extraction. You're pouring in resin into your reactors, not plant matter. And you've kept it cold since you took it off the field. That's my dream.
Yeah, I think that's really it.
And the nitrogen, hopefully, too.
Underground containers in California, I mean, are the only way you can do it without using crazy grid, issues, because anything above ground in California is just subjected to, so much heat and so much movement and everything that it's, and then, to try and put a refrigerator or units on there, it just becomes like a wild amount of electricity.
And it just so
and I don't know
happens-
that that's what we're going for, is ultimate electricity use. So there's this weird balance of trying to find passive systems to flow into these modern needs, because we do want the high grade.
Yeah, ancient meets future, though, and that's what's funny is the old school cats always knew all along. You bury your weed, it's
that's all I'm
it's
saying.
It's funny how much the old kind of knowledge really is proving that much more true today. Just around farmers, old wives' tales around harvest times around the full moon, or just times where they're not harvesting in the middle of the day. There's just so much deep wisdom kind of in a lot of these older practices that I think now are getting that much more validated.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make the bridge again to the old practices, is that all of the temperatures and the humidities that everybody is talking about to preserve these trichomes and also these plants and herbalism is exactly what the earth's, below the earth's surface, and geothermal is what it holds constant and continuous. So Mother Nature has a plan. There's a deep understanding. She has a knowing of how to preserve these plants. And I think that all we have to do is very easily tap into
Utilize
it
the
rather
system.
than try to overthink it. So it is
Biomimicry.
so true. And we know that it's always the basements of our homes that have always dried the best flour and made the best concentrates.
And consistent temperatures to where the door is not opening and it's hot,
Yep.
it's cold.
It just
It has to
stays
be
there.
consistent. And then you sometimes will find some herb gets more potent in some cases after 4-6 months of not being opened and whatnot.
Totally.
Big love to Mojave Richmond in the house.
Hey, Mojave,
Yeah, welcome, Mojave.
brother.
Hey everyone, thanks for the invite. Stoked to be here.
Yeah,
you
we've
guys
been
have?
having a
Hey,
good conversation.
I can't believe you're here, Mojave.
I know, Sam. It's good to see you.
Hey, guys, with the cryo freezing, I've seen a lot of hemp flour dried with cryo, and it kind of reminds me of Cheetos when it's dried. Now I understand the resin, and I think we can think about that in a more methodical way, but I understand where everyone's coming from. We need to preserve things, but there is an optimal temperature and range, and the time that the flower will actually encapsulate some of these monoterpenes and really hold them in. And I think there is a perfect place for that to happen. I just think it's not talked enough about and studied enough as to when a varietal should and how long it
found is that if you do a terpene profile, say the top 50 terpenes of a fresh skunk number 1, for example, and then you dry it for 2 weeks, test it again, then box it, cure it for a month or so, test it again, And then finally terpene test the resin after it's been extracted from that same clone. You see a decrease in the profile of monoterpenes. And, the more it's been handled, processed, and
Yep.
hung around, the more volatile ones are gone.
Yep. Yeah, we see that exact same thing, and that's where I
It's
think,
really that simple.
yeah, and I think that's where it's so much of the long-term preservation that people have in for building out their business model, instead of people kind of racing to grow as much as the neighbor, being able to just preserve as the highest potential and quality, because even yields, it's like if you harvest and kind of are able to control temperatures, from the entirety from kind of what temperatures plants were being harvested under, how quickly those plants were able to get below temperature control conditions, how quickly or how long kind of those temperatures are able to be maintained, because that was one of the big failed kind of experiments around nitrogen packaging. People with nitrogen everybody seemed to bail on that all at the same time, but it was a kind of a failed experiment because everybody nitrogen packaged their herb but then just let it sit in warehouses, to like fluctuating day-to-day temperature, humidity, all these things, and a year later, sure, you open it up and it's bomb, but then it catches up in 5 minutes, but there was no continuity in the, that temperature, humidity, chain of custody. And so, I think that one added variable would have actually probably, given that technology a lot of props.
And Alex, like what you're kind of alluding to is like, there is an amount that is too much, right? Right. So I think that's something that's a cold chain event all the way to a consumer, right? And that's something as this moves forward, I'm starting to think about a whole lot in terms of just resin, right? But at the same time, on the flip side of it, the flower is super problematic because it's just old. Like you don't want old herb, you want fresh herb. So what is that time frame, I guess, is what I'm asking. And because I've never really looked into it. I've just kind of, my bioassay tells me like, oh, this is fresh. You're right. Like there's no beyond that.
I have looked into it a bit. I've never had pot that I froze for more than a year or two, so I can't really speak on herb. But resin heads, both cleaned and uncleaned, so farmer's grade hash, it's about 30% THC. It's just resin heads, but with other trash in with it. And then there's a cleaned up resin that's, in the low 80s, and it's just resin heads, nothing else. And for a decade, frozen -30. And you can either flush it with nitrogen or not. And it doesn't really change, not at all.
That makes sense to me, Sam. But now we bring in plant, we bring in a living, breathing organism, right? That's drying, and that it's decaying at a faster rate than the resin, to your point. So what is the, I guess I'm just asking.
That's why
what do you think
the secret is to get it to the point of resin. I mean, that is the active, whether it's recreational or medical or whatever, that is what you're after. So if you had an way.
We lost you, Sam. At least I did.
Yeah, that's why get it as cold as possible. Like you said, Colin, we don't want old weed, we want fresh weed. It's like, exactly, get it as fresh as possible. Do these processes so you preserve everything, and then only then make the decision through your bioassay where you have everything, where you enjoy it at different rates. And because here's the thing, like someone said earlier, oh, sometimes it's too much. Yeah, too much of a specific ratio, but a different ratio may not be too much. So we can't get into these generalizations of like, well, I had 9% terpenes one time and it was way too much. Well, yeah, it might have been super high in D-limonene or another caustic terpene that, osamine burn the throat or whatever. Yes, exactly. Well, what do you got there, Mojave?
I forgot about them. Botanical terpenes, non-cannabis derived. And when I pulled them out, it was pretty far out. They were all the same amount inside each container for the most part. And a lot of it volatilized, there's definitely, it's a gummy kind of resin left over, but some of the tops were completely corroded versus other. This is ossamine and this is linalool. And all the way across, with some of them were just like, here's terpenoline, which is a little bit more corroded. Here's alpha-pinene, which is less corroded. Anyway, I just think it's a really interesting conversation about packaging, longevity. As our good buddy Rob Clark always said, not all terpenes are good terpenes. I think there is something with fresh weed that is a little bit, there's this anthropological concept of cultural relativism, which says like if a culture decides to do something, whether it's batshit crazy or not, they did it for a reason. And people traditionally really went through a lot of effort to age cannabis and to kind of de-terp the flower before they consumed it. And I think that was, definitely it was a different world, a different market, a different types of products that were being consumed. But I think it's really interesting. I think that there are certain profiles that improve more with age and certain products that are more stable. I've froze flower for, probably 10 years and pulled it out of the freezer and it's still pretty damn fresh. Like I've seen stuff that was, on the market that was a few months old that had been used and abused. And the terp profile definitely changes even in the freezer, and it's hard to keep it, completely frozen and sealed for that long. But I think it's an interesting conversation. Like right now in California, we've got this big glut and all this flour from last year that no one could sell and it expired. And, you have to turn it into distillate and get a new COA on it to extend its life. And I think that there's no reason why we can't store flour for a long time. And I think that there's, quite possibly a good reason to not smoke fresh flower for certain varieties and for certain, it's kind of like the aged wine, aged cheese thing. It definitely it changes in a profound way. But for some varieties, I've just noticed, like these, like high terpenoline varieties seem to be more stable, for instance. And that maybe that's just because the effect of terpenoline on aged flower seems to not diminish as much as these other higher caryophyllene, higher myrcene varieties and stuff that seem to, like you get no effect after a while, or the effect is completely diminished. Anyway, I just think it's an interesting conversation. I posted this thing on Instagram, and I rarely do memes, and it got a number of people freaked out, like, what's it doing to our packages? And since Sam's here, he knows.
Dude, what's it doing to your throat? Like when you held that up, I was like, whoa, that's what my throat looks like when I take a dab of osamine.
Well, haven't you always noticed that, like when you dab, you get.
Sorry, is it residue? It's creating a corrosion? So like what's?
Well, so these are also pure terpenes, right?
Okay, I don't know it's this, but most terpenes are good solvents. A lot of those rubbers are plasticized with things called plasticizers. And a lot of times what happens is the terpene gets into the rubber, leaches out the plasticizer. Those plasticizers are nasty compounds. They're like dioctyl phthalate and phthalates and shit like that. But what you might be seeing there is just the precipitation of the phthalate plasticizer from the rubber. So what I mean to say is that it's nothing inherent in the terpene. It's just the terpene interacting with this rubber that's not suited for.
But why would some terpenes react that way, the way osamine is reacting, and others wouldn't? It's just interesting because osamine is literally one of the harshest terps on the throat, and it looks like it has the most breakdown, whatever it's breaking down.
It's just a good solvent for the plasticizer, and it's able to draw it out or something. I don't know, Mark. It's weird.
Interesting. Hey, welcome to Debbie. Debbie's in the house.
Good morning, everyone. Whoa, really interesting stuff to wander into, talking about this terpene plastic interaction. Did not know that.
Little sensory evaluation at 9:55 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Mojave, can you scrape off, like, is it like a powder or a white residue or something? Or is it like, you say there's corrosion, like what is the material? What does it look like?
No, it kind of feels like it's just gummy. Almost like it precipitated, like almost it feels like it like it passed through the rubber
Dissolved kind
and
of.
then it's
Dissolve the
caked on
stuff and now it
outside.
crashes out.
Yeah. And I can hardly open the containers. Oh, this one opened.
Yeah, it would be interesting to
I've
see
seen that for
over a
years.
prolonged period of time, if the rubber becomes brittle, then that tells you it's leaching out the plasticizer. A rubber without a plasticizer in there will turn brittle. It'll turn brittle and it'll break.
Well,
You know, one thing.
Sorry,
One thing I'd say real quick. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Val. No, you got it.
Go,
man.
Marvin.
No, I'm saying if you've ever seen the ball jars on certain varieties, the ball jars, the rubber seal on ball jar starts to crack. And I seem to remember this from a tip from, I don't know, Sam, I don't know if I got this from you, but this is something way back in Amsterdam, I think I learned, but was to throw the rubber band in a jar of flour and then pull a month later,
If
pull it
it's
out.
the right variety, like the high haze variety, yes, I've seen them melt those rubber bands easily.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and that's the one thing I was going to say real quick on the test side, because we, around 2018, we invested in like a smoking robot as well, so that could kind of, basically pull the aerosol vape from a vape cartridge that's already been aerosolized, and then is capturing that aerosol, and then we're running further testing on it. So we're working with groups to help in like just long-term shelf life type studies, if they're either using kind of natural kind of derived cannabis terpenes kind of blended at whatever proportions or ratios, or kind of groups that are kind of just adding these different botanical or otherwise other type of terpenes. But we definitely, we have seen some really interesting things on the corrosion side of things with like with regard to releasing and increasing high levels of heavy metals kind of over time, kind of from cartridges, various cartridges. I mean, there's all these unknown variables about what is actually, in the hardware that's leading to that, but it's also this combination of, okay, at what what concentration of terpene are in these, if you have kind of 10% limonene in there, kind of over time, is it going to be leading to more corrosion than others? Especially with certain types of hardware. But these are definitely all really fascinating questions that I think people need to, just take into consideration, especially if they're formulating products and putting them out.
You might be familiar with Amber Weiss's study that was recently published. So Amber Weiss, I think, is a professor up in Washington, and she studied and published the results of a study of something that you're exactly addressing, which is the leaching of heavy metals in through vape hardware into the vape cartridge fluid, and what impact that could have on human safety. Is this actually putting lead and cadmium and tin and all these other nasty metals? Because you got to think of any shiny metal product, most likely coming from the same factory in China, any shiny metal could be contaminated with these other metals, which you probably don't want to have in vape cartridges where you're inhaling the stuff into your lungs. And so Amber Weiss just recently published a paper. Maybe what I could do is post a link to it. And also brings back, again, the need to really have not only oversight, but the analytical methods like ICP and whatnot. So you can look at, maybe what storing cartridge fluid in these tanks for prolonged periods of time does in terms of introducing metal content to the fluid themselves. Because vape pens aren't going away anytime soon. So the real question is what's the best way to manufacture that to make sure that not only the thing works, but it works in a way that doesn't leach heavy metals into what you're inhaling, because God knows what the long-term impact of that could be.
I think not getting so tricky with everything, with the old school apothecaries, have been dealing with essential oils for, hundreds, thousands of years, and they also volatilize, and people have used glass and glass syringes and glass jars with glass lids and copper and silver, and these metals are proven to be good for us, and gold in some cases, so we continue to get these new products from modernization, and then wow, we found out they're all tainted, and then now all of a sudden they're, whoa, what a shocker. You know, all these new items coming that are cheap and stuff are now toxic. So I think
There's-
that we look towards, again, you know, let's not, the way we get educated nowadays is to forget about the past and think that we're only learning now. And there's ways that we can build from the past and bring that into our future packaging and stuff. So, you know, let's
It's
just,
pretty cool if you look at old school apothecary, boxes, the herbs that had the volatile oil in it that were very aromatic also had, each one of those drawers was a glass. And they were kept inside glass. And then the ones that were less volatile were kept inside of the wooden drawers. So
and certain
it's
herbs were kept in
pretty-
the basement
pretty
that they had to
interesting.
go down into the basement to get it, you know, depending on what it was. And so, you know, I think it's important for us to just remember that. And also that, you know, regenerative and organically grown cannabis and earth grown cannabis tends to keep its terpenes longer, you know, than things that are aeroponically or hydroponically grown. In some cases, maybe Alec, you could maybe dispute that, and I would be open, you know, but you find that a lot of times that, you know, the soil grown cannabis tends to keep its flavor, has more integrity in it longer, and then the medicine out of it, you know, can be.
And that's only because of more microbiology may be present. And I think that that's going to be the real bridge that, you know, us as regenerative farmers and as regenerative medicine makers are really interested to see the science of, you know, terpene and all secondary metabolites that are profound inside of the plant, and then what is profound inside of the soil, and what's profound inside of the plant's endophytic system, and, you know, its own microbiome. So that's going to be like the next
our
cool
biome
bridge.
and our blood-brain barrier, and,
Yeah.
and the way that it.
Well, that's
Go
one
ahead.
thing I've been really fascinated. You know, because with all things equal, you know, like you grow the same strain, same plant, different conditions, hydroponically versus regenerative organic, you know, like with Elaine Ingham's, you know, soil food web research and all the stuff she's shown, you know, whenever you do that side-by-side study, you can track whenever the microbiome of the soil is balanced to what the plant wants. You know, you can track the doubling of the secondary metabolite that plant produces. And you see that with lycopene in tomatoes, you see that with various vitamins and berries, and, you know, with cannabis, terpenes are the secondary metabolites. So, you know, that would go to, you know, suggest that, you know, there's the potential for, you know, regeneratively organic grown, you know, kind of optimally organic grown cannabis potentially being able to produce doubling of the, you know, secondary metabolites. You know, that's like, you know, there needs, you know, some, you know, a lot of side by side to kind of be able to demonstrate but that's really fascinating to me, because, you know, from, you know, there's everything you could do as a farmer to grow the plant most optimally, and then from that point on, then it's okay, then it's all about, you know, post-harvest handling, temperatures, all these things that you do to kind of lock in and preserve, like, you know, what you were able to kind of produce, you know, and everything's working against you, you know, kind of if you're working with, you know, harvesting in higher temperatures versus, you know, because we've seen groups that will kind of, you know, harvest, you know, kind of fresh frozen material in the field, you know, in the middle of the day, kind of an 80+ degree temperatures, and then, you know, do the same thing in the middle of the night, you know, zombie harvest, and kind of do that and track kind of the, you know, resin, essential oil return off the extract and yield, and you see substantial kind of difference, you know, 20+%, you know, ish, you know, up to 20% or more kind of terpene content loss just in that, you know, kind of decision of harvest time temperature.
So here's a
times,
question.
You know?
Here's a question. Some of the terpiest and most ridiculous hash I've ever made in my life has been in Jamaica, where it's like literally like 100 degrees in the field. I can't even go in the field for more than like 20 or 30 minutes at a time, or my pasty white ass just turns lobster red, and then I can't, you know, enjoy myself anymore. So I'm like going in and out of the fields every 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm just looking at these plants, and they're so stinky, and the field is so stinky. And I'm just thinking like, holy shit, like these things are off-gassing an insane amount of terpenes right now. Is it because of that process that it's producing more, because at the end of it, when I like when we harvested that shit and then ran it through the bags, and trust me, we were not keeping it cold all the way till they got into the bags. They were in like warm plastic bags or whatever. It was so terpy. And I mean, dude, Sam, even you can acknowledge, because this was at a time where this was the first time Sam ever smoked anything I had. Okay. Prior to that, because we were in Jamaica together, prior to that, he only smoked his own shit. Like it was that good. And I'm not like saying that he shouldn't have, because truly, like, that shit was from another planet. But this stuff in Jamaica was like, I want to say it was almost on point. Wouldn't you agree, Sam? Do you remember the stuff we made from
Well,
the doctor?
there was 2 points. Number one, I didn't have enough to keep smoking just mine. So, but number two, the stuff we made was outrageously good.
Agreed. It was really good. I still have pictures of it.
No, it was really, it was also a darker, redder color than the stuff grown in my greenhouse, for example.
So I, Marcus, I have some thoughts on that. I mean, Alec was bringing up like biotransformation through enzymatic uptake and all these things that can happen through, target feedings and kind of, there's the term, just driving crop steering, right? But you can do crop steering in many different ways, and that's just an ideology. And then there's the stress responsors, right? You have stress response that the plant's giving off and combating the environment that it's in. In most cases, that is going to directly result in the resin. And that could go good or bad. That could go both sides, right? You could have a stress response that stresses the plant out so bad that it just like goes the wrong direction, or it's stress response in the right direction, and it allows it to express a profile that it hasn't really expressed before. And I've seen that firsthand over the years a lot. So, I think there's 2 ways to go about this, and there's 2 ideologies here, but they all kind of end up the same place if you do the right things. So I think there's that to think about. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that as well, but I think that's, from my experience, targeting and then also going the other way and stressing them out, you get some equally amazing results.
Yeah,
frankly.
I agree with that. And, one thing I would say too is, kind of Marcus, to the point you were just bringing up, I mean, certain strains of genetics have the potential to put out certain amounts, just inherently, like before the, optimal feeding and, kind of cultivation side of things happen. I mean, you could have certain strains that sure are really, really high in cannabinoid content, but they might not ever have the potential to put out more than 2 to 3% terpene content in the dried flower, as opposed to other kind of strains that might be, lower overall in cannabinoid content or overall THC, but, might, kind of be able to readily pump out 5+ potential percent, and that's where I'm really fascinated too about what Colin was just bringing up. I think there's all these, like, I don't know if it's hormesis, environmental hormesis or something, but it's just like the plant's ability to kind of adapt to the kind of given, kind of stress responses that environment it's growing in provides, and so, I think there's all these different fascinating things to track, but all things given, each unique cultivar has its potential of what it can put out. And, who knows, maybe the potential or the might be different environments across the world where it might be more optimally, able to be expressed in certain areas. But all things considered, strain has the potential, to put out a certain amount. And then, like, I think there's the future study to understand, okay, well, if it's, 1-to-1 soil, fungal bacterial ratio and microbes in the soil and kind of optimally kind of regeneratively organically grown versus hydroponic, can there be this increase or doubling of secondary metabolites? Because then from there, it's okay, the plant is able to produce its potential, maybe through cultivation methods, it can be drastically doubled or increased versus not. But then from that point, it's like post-harvest handling is where kind of, we see 60 to 80% of the like devaluation or, kind of step, and that's what's really fascinating to see, when we've been on kind of a bit of a, not public service announcement, like sometimes I feel like Chicken Little, but not screaming about the skies falling, but about the terps are volatilizing, and trying to kind of help just empower those we work with on this understanding of how much they need to vet their supply chain partners, because they could be putting the most premium bomb herb forward, that they preserved 5% terpene content in it, but then the time it gets to the distributor sits around a month before it goes to be packaged, processed, put into jars, and then driven in non-refrigerated kind of transportation to a dispensary. Well, now it's at the dispensary getting rejected because it might have like 70% less terpene content. And now the distributor is going back to the farmer to try to renegotiate price.
And if it's not going, if it's not getting sent back, it's going into a non-cooled vault.
Yeah, exactly, into a non-cooled vault.
Dude, I'm in the same boat with you.
And I think in the future, I think the farmers and the end consumers are going to be most outraged by how lacking because people are paying premium prices for like top shelf quality herb. But if you actually look at it, on the kind of phytochemical standpoint, it's like 60-70% less actually bomb than when it was able to be preserved.
And what does that do? What does that do to not bomb herb, the stuff that the majority of people are actually growing? How about that? Now put that into that non-cooled supply chain, and you end up with
you're done.
Way below mediocre. Welcome, Etienne.
That's not a good place to compete in right now.
Really quickly, I just wanted to bring up just the definition of secondary metabolites. It has the word metabolism in it. So when we're talking about secondary metabolites, we're actually talking about the metabolism of the plant. And when we compare the metabolism of a human being in warm weather or warm climates, or we actually look at the metabolism of soil, when we have year-round warmth, we have very high metabolism rates. The soil is constantly metabolizing. We've got tremendous amounts of microbiology that's tremendously metabolizing. So the actual endophytic system of the plant is going to be at a much higher rate, a much higher metabolism. And those people understand, who are coming from the north where it isn't sunny all of the time, that we have slower metabolism in our soil. We have slower growth cycles. And when we go to the warm weather, our metabolism kicks up. And a lot of people say, hey, I actually lost a lot of weight when I went to warmer weather. Well, that reaction is your metabolism, which is your microbiome. So of course, we're going to have higher secondary metabolites, because when we go to warmer weather, where it's warm year round and sunny year round, we're going to have continuous metabolizing. So I just wanted to add that.
Damn, nailed it. That's awesome. Thank you.
Alex, what was the highest terp content that you guys found?
We see in a very small percentage of the data for dried flower, 3 to 5.5% is really kind of the range in that really unique subset of data. Again, about 1.5% is the average of everything we've tested, and 3 to 5.5% is this in this other league we see in the data, this like really high percentile of dried flower.
I'm pretty sure that the folks at NAPRO showed me something that was 8 or 10.
Jesus.
I've definitely had that conversation with Mark as well. No, I didn't see it, but he was like, yeah, 8 to 10. I was just like 8 to 10. I wouldn't want to concentrate that.
Is that wet or dried plant material?
Dried plant material.
Wow.
Dried.
Alec, quick question for you. And I'm happy to see you. Hey. Good to see you here. What about the difference in the terpene profiles of trikes and rosin? Do you see much difference?
I don't think I'd be able to really speak to, because we see kind of concentrates across, I haven't been able to see kind of the divide in kind of types, because like a lot of people, submit as just a name, of the strain, not kind of differentiating what type of kind of extraction it is. But
okay.
We see that at Embark, because we get, when we buy, if we make flower rosin, for instance, we'll get a COA from the flower before we can bring it into our facility. Oh, I froze.
an amount of heat for an amount of time, there's going to be an amount of volatilization that happens. You know, but so each step through kind of, you know, the process of whether you're doing solventless or kind of solvent, you know, there's all these things internally, best practices that can be done to kind of just try to optimize or minimize, optimize kind of preservation or minimize kind of loss. But yeah, I wouldn't know much more about that. Marcus, you had froze up. You're back.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to end up freezing up again, but at Embark, we have to get COAs for the flower. Then we make the bubble. We have to get a COA for the bubble. If we want to make the rosin, then we'll get a COA for the rosin. So we've seen all sorts of different things, from cultivars that change very little to cultivars that change a lot, and that terpenes that weren't there in the beginning are there in the end, especially from like non-rosin to rosin. Heating them up, I guess, changes them in ways, but yeah, nothing that's been shocking.
One thing I would say to that real quick, what you were just mentioning, Marcus, and you know, and I might have mentioned this before kind of on Hash Church, but you know, from what we see, you know, kind of in the you know, ranking of most present to least present, and you know, the over 40 terpenes we're actively testing for every time we do a test. You know, really it's these 5 to 6 primary monoterpenes. You know, then there's a few sesquiterpenes like beta-caryophyllene and humulene. You know, some of these other type compounds. But you know, essentially what we see is, you know, in the total potential of the plant, whenever it's ripe or kind of nothing's volatilized, you know, kind of it'll show in the rank order these monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, you know, on. But whenever all the primary monoterpenes boil off, as well as the sesquiterpenes boil off, you know, we see that, you know, there's a concentration of these really small present terpenes that were there that are all of a sudden the primary things on the profile, you know, and they're the higher boiling point terpenes that end in an OL, like neurolidol, bisbolol, guaiol, phytol, you know, and so these terpenes become the profile whenever there's an absence of the primary compounds that are now gone.
Well, those are all terpenoids, right? They're not terpenes anymore.
Sure. Yeah. And I appreciate that. Yeah, they're like higher alcohol kind of based type compounds, right? Or and you know, and so, but we deem this artifact kind of terpene profile as the swag. We call it the swag flag, and the swag flag is essentially any time that there's, you know, like about 0.75% total terpene content or less, and all the mono and sesquiterpenes are gone, and the only terpenes that remain in the profile, like bisbolol, neurolidol, guaiol, and phytol, that's pretty much the artifact of swag and the hay smell from what we can gather.
That's wild, dude. That's wild. That is absolutely.
Is that what you're testing due to the anaerobic decomposition that's happening, whatever the cannabis is put in?
Right. Yeah. It's the artifact of it's the artifact terpene profile that remains whenever, you know, the lacking kind of prep or the lacking quality and kind of how it was dried and cured, stored, kind of, you know, is, you know, it's what, you know, whenever it goes flat, everything else is boiled off and volatilized. Kind of those kind of very repeatedly stay behind. And how we kind of came across that is we had this outlier flag, you know, that, you know, anytime there was a unique terpene profile that didn't kind of we see with really high accuracy and predictability, it would get flagged for going through all that data, and it was really fast going through all the data, because I was like, oh, these are where all the really unique land race, like super rare profiles are going to be. And albeit though there was, you know, very unique rare amounts of profiles in there was a very small amount of the data, and a vast majority of the data in that outlying data set was this artifact of swag. And you just see it so repeatedly across thousands of samples, you know, you're like, oh yeah, that's for sure what that is.
So you literally have a profile for a cannabis corpse.
Yeah, totally. Is that what not to do? Yeah.
When
I don't know if it's related, but anecdotally, I have a story where a friend of mine resurrected some seeds that his parents took away from him like 30 years ago, and he found them after his dad had passed away, because they were going through his stuff, and he found this old bag of weed that his dad had took from him like 30 years ago. So he popped some of these beans, and yeah, it was actually a Panama Red variety. And this older cat that we hang out with, who doesn't really like back in the 70s and 80s, before Grateful Dead tour brought Kind Bud from NorCal across the country. So I think there is something to that profile that you were talking about, Alec, that what the most of those compounds again are terpene alcohols. So again, maybe there was something about the aging of that, and maybe again about the way that cannabis back in the 70s and 80s was smuggled up from Mexico or wherever up into where we lived in Northeast, and some way that flavor, that essence, that flag you're talking about, took this guy right back to the 60s. Oh man, that's how weed used to taste. He loved it.
I don't miss the taste of dirt. Remember when all the cannabis just actually tasted like dirt? That was crazy.
Or like mold, right?
Yeah, exactly.
With hints of diesel fuel.
Right, because sometimes it was packed in cartons inside gas tanks, right? Occasionally,
And he was a paraquat.
Yeah.
When talking about these terpene profiles that repeat over and over again that Alec was mentioning, I just wonder how much the impact of prohibition and the mentality of how much can I get and how fast can I get it bottlenecked us into these particular dominant terpenes. What do you guys have to think about that?
Well, I mean, it's also been subjective of the farmer himself or herself, because even Sam has stated time and time again how he selected certain phenotypes based on the flavor profiles that he liked specifically. So there's also other types of genetics that were also lost due to our propagators, who are actually perpetuating the genetics based on what they liked, also based off of the growing environments that they were successful in.
They were so much more rare than the how much can I get and how fast can I get it crowd, though.
Also, people were consuming large amounts. If you think about the volume that they were smoking in a big giant cone or a big giant ball of hash. So the terpene to cannabinoid ratios were, completely different than what you're getting in a joint.
Right.
And maybe that had to do with one of the reasons why they were kind of actively seeking to volatilize a lot of those monoterps, was because they were going to get a certain volume in there, and then they're going to even higher because they had extra THC. So I think it's a really interesting question, and why they selected those varieties for their own particular needs versus why we select varieties for the market.
Well, if you look at several hundred years ago, Mojave, they were selecting just by smoking and saving the seeds of the varieties that got them the highest, or they liked the effects or the taste or the smell of. And they were incredibly successful, actually, if you think about it. All kinds of recreational varieties are really just THC only until the CBD craze started. It was really common to find THC only varieties, especially in equatorial tropical varieties. It was really extremely common.
It's fascinating to kind of think about the ancient practices and selection, and how kind of how much, I guess, brilliance of there was kind of through the plant that was cultivated by the people, and then so much was lost in a lot of ways from the global kind of prohibition against this plant and persecution against this plant, and kind of paraquatting, and kind of just I'm really curious on what those eradication efforts did to the rarity kind of cannabis, certain profiles that might have kind of been lost forever, that could have potentially provided medicine for the future of needs that we don't even know we need yet. And so it's really crazy to see how much that prohibition and kind of
to be honest, Alex, to be truly honest, I think we've lost more by doing hippie types who think they're doing a favor by taking equatorial seeds to Afghanistan or Afghani genetics to tropical equatorial areas. Based although neither one of them did cannabis any good.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of like planting like eucalyptus in random areas and it becoming an invasive species kind of thing. Is that what you're saying? It's tainting the gene pools of the unique.
It's now because under supposed to share it with the government there. The same government that for the last 50 years have been prosecuting cannabis growers and destroying cannabis. So, I mean, what is the world? I really don't know anymore.
And I think that really could be bringing in the conversation of like what's invasive and what's being traveled and what, like there's certain areas and regions species because a bird brought it there and because the soil and the area and the environment were perfect and because the nature called that particular plant to that area and zone. And it just so happens that a lot of the hippie types from the 60s and 70s that were trading the seeds were the ones that were traveling, and humans have always traveled and we've always had relationships with seeds, and especially with psychoactive plants. So whenever something sparks us, then of course we want to share it. It's part of our collective consciousness as human beings. So I think it would be hard to say just the hippie types if we look at all of humanity, because then we're looking at the cannabis plant having changed multiple times into multiple different facets for multiple different reasons that are unbeknownst to us because it wasn't even scribed at that time. So I think just to pick aside just one particular generation of the plant really isn't giving the plant its full volume
400 million
and
years
understanding of its full potential.
I appreciate that, Kelly. I just real quick, I just wanted to say I really appreciate that, and I was going to say God bless Terrence McKenna for bringing the ayahuasca vine, Banisteriopsis caffi, to Hawaii, and how much that that plant loves growing in that environment, and how much it's now kind of really helping in the kind of global kind of replanting and kind of and just the idea of sustainably how we kind of are able to grow these plants, without depleting, various regions of the world in the Amazon and. But just from a biocultural conservational effort, how I appreciate that perspective.
Well, I think it's
we're stewards of the plants, helping the plant spread.
It's maybe not the. Sorry, I was gonna say it's not the hippies. It's what the other thing Sam mentioned. It's the airplanes. We can blame it on the airplanes.
And airplanes, right? And also, I'm not sure cannabis is 400 million years old. I mean, it may be, it's possible, but
the receptors are
scientific proof for that 400 million year old age.
The endocannabinoid system is older than the
the endocannabinoid system came before the cannabis plant.
Right. But another point I just wanted to make on this whole hybridization is that it's the natural evolution of organisms to want to spread themselves and disperse themselves as far as they can to be as successful. But at the same time, it's the isolation that creates diversity. They had this.
Right. And you want to try to preserve that diversity if possible.
Exactly. There's a really great movie or documentary and book called The Journey of Man about 10 years ago or so. And it was about collecting, the data on the human genome. And the point that was really interesting at the end of this documentary, they kind of, they went around the world and they found all these points where human populations would diverge and come together. And they literally found the story of how our genetics moved around the earth, right? We now know that. We know we came from Africa into Central Asia, Europe, blah, 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 in North America. But they couldn't have gotten that data any later than when they did, because all those populations had all blended and there was no original pockets of all these different genes. And that's what happened with cannabis. You know, we spread out, but then all of a sudden we spread out and we isolated and became unique, but then we all blended up again. You know, and it's kind of like
right. The best examples of that is Mexico, Jamaica, and Morocco. There are no land races left in those.
Dogs, right? Dogs. We have all these mutts in the world running around, right?
Right, but it's nice to have Afghans and Chihuahuas.
Yeah, and it's important to think about for culture and for just you know, diversity in our own biology, how important it was for us to stay separate for so long before we started blending. You know, and the blending part is kind of inevitable because of the airplanes and because of the way our culture is connected and stuff like that. But
were we ever separate if we were supposedly all from Africa? Back together and now we're mixing again because evolution needs it. I think it doesn't work to be isolated. That's the whole entire point of isolation. Like, isolation is not life, even in the case of, well, I mean, you know, cultures living in certain areas for thousands of years, obviously that's successful and beautiful, but then, you know, modernization happens, people travel, they move, the world changes. So I think that, you know, right now we're at a point of, you know, needing biodiversity and cultural polyculture. And, you know, I guarantee a bunch of the Afghanistan families that came over, you know, in this last flux probably have maybe some ganja seeds on them. And you know what? I wouldn't say we're mad about it. Like,
I'm
you know,
not sure the Neanderthal people would agree with you.
Well, I don't know, you know.
I think that the intuition here is that we are trying to explain something that a plant has been doing. So we are trying to take this human idea of what is best for the plant through our own experiences of what is best for the plant. And it's just very interesting of our explanations of natural science and what we think is best in our own relationship with this plant. And that's really what it comes down to, because so many of us have these different relationships with the plant, whether it be only science or whether it be only nature. And it's like this human brain expansion that is us trying to explain it in our language so that we can have a good experience with it. So we can have a good experience with it. And it's all just really interesting. And I just wanted to say that all of it is so incredibly valid, because our brain is like the filtration system of how it's all going to be spit out and how we're all going to understand this great microcosm of nature, basically, and how it interacts with us.
I'm definitely in favor of saving biodiversity, both in plants, animals, people. I mean, I can think of nothing more boring than us all being the same. There's even a song, I think, it goes, wouldn't it be real drag if we were all the same?
Dude, now that's an episode where both Skunkman Sam and I have sung. You don't get that every Hash Church. I also have one other thing to say. Shout out to Terrence McKenna. I heard Alec drop his name earlier. I was in the other room cutting my kids some apples and cucumbers, but it was just would have just been Terrence's 75th birthday on November 16th. Huge inspiration in my life, you know, like really set me off on a path. And I always drop this whenever Terrence's name gets brought up. My all-time favorite lecture by him is called Psilocybin in the Sands of Time. I'll put it into the description link, so anyone that wants to go check that out can. It is a doozy.
Oh, I was hoping to get a screenshot of that picture you shared.
I'll send it to you, bro.
Thank you. That's really rad. I appreciate that.
It
And
just
I
happens.
wanted to say something to Sam. You're saying that, that we're all the same. I think that it's pretty interesting. Just a little fact is that when you look at our DNA, we're like 99.9% all the same. But when you look at our microbiome, we're 99.9% different. So I think as long as microbiology is going to be alive on the planet, there's always going to be, incredible amounts of diversity.
And I agree. Viva la différence.
Viva la différence.
Hey, if you all allow me, I would like to just shine a light on the subject that is the passing of Antonio Escorrotado. I don't know if you all know who he is, but he was one of my favorite drug researchers. He wrote the history of the general history of drugs. He was a philosopher, a Spanish philosopher, and he just passed away. I just read the news. He was 80. So if you could all just send some love to him. He was one of the people, and when I read his book, that I realized that I wanted to study drugs. I'm not kidding. So if you could just share some love to the guy. He was one of the first well-known anti-prohibitionists that really spread words about it. All right.
Thank you for that.
What was his name again?
Antonio Escorrotado. He wrote a book on the 80s and 70s about the general history of drugs. I remember that I used a bunch of in my thesis, and it's very nice. It's very nice to read it. It's a very good flow on all the substances. And definitely he did one of the biggest publications on anti-prohibitionism. So he was a real fighter, and he passed away with 80 today. So we're very thankful for his existence. I'm sure that without him, a bunch of other people wouldn't have been fighting against prohibitionism.
Our condolences as a collective to the great and hard work that they do and perpetuate. Much love and great respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I raise my pipe to all the fallen soldiers and all the ones that are still here. It is this. Someone just mentioned in chat. These church episodes is how wisdom can propagate. I do love when you guys share, any type. Drop the names of the people that have inspired you, books that have inspired you. It's just a great source of information for people. And sorry, whoever was about to go can speak now.
All good. All good. I was wondering what varietals you will be bringing down that you really liked this year. Flynn and Alice to the Legends of Hash. And also I was wondering what you thought about the 5-degree shelf temp on the freeze dryer, and if you guys have gone for that or how you see.
Flynn, talk about the freeze dryer.
No, I don't usually go that low on the freeze dryer. I don't know. I like to keep my cycles so that they're done in about 24 hours, because usually we got more trays to put in there.
And how much can you max out on a freeze dryer like that? In 24 hours, what will you pull out of the freeze dryer in total weight?
It depends on the freeze dryer. The XL pharmaceuticals actually take a little bit longer than 24 hours. Sometimes they're a little bit more like 30. But usually you can get 8 to 1,200 grams in there pretty well and get it all dry. Kind of depends on the strain though too. If you're going to get it dry in that amount of time, some things take a bit longer. Or if you don't load it perfectly and you get a little thickness in one corner because your trays aren't even on the thing or they're not level, and then it takes longer too, all that type of stuff.
Totally. I always found I couldn't get much more than a kilo into those freeze dryers. Lab Conco a little bit more, but Lab Conco is not really a freeze dryer you want to leave overnight, because once it cycles, it dries much, much faster than the other ones. But it doesn't hold a cold temperature like Harvest Rights and Freeze Dry Co's and those other units. It's an interesting game, the freeze dryer game, because I thought initially I wanted big freeze dryers, and then I realized no, I want to be specific to cultivars. The regulations in Canada, I can't mix cultivars. I could never wash two different things and put them in the same freeze dryer. So suddenly it became really not that valuable of having a giant mill rock freeze dryer that I could fit 50 kilos of bubble into, because I'm not going to be making 50 kilos of any one variety anytime soon. So it's kind of what I found.
At home, we never ever feel the whole freeze dryer. I feel like it, at least, because what we wash in the house is different than like in a
up in Humboldt when we wash
Humboldt,
like 15 to in a day we'll wash 45 kilos of wet material. So that ends up being
makes sense.
A hash on a 3 to 5% yield. So
Yep. We do the same thing with, I mean, we're getting now into fresh frozen, but the same equivalent amount of cured and dried flour, which would probably be, 8 or 9.
And Josh
10.
asked about the variety we're taking down. I don't know if we can speak about it. Can we?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess. I think if they say we can. I mean, I think we're gonna
okay. That makes sense.
I'm not sure. Can we?
I'll tell you one thing. We're definitely not bringing rosin. And anyone who does, hey, you're going to hear from me. I'll tell you that.
We make fun of it because it's Legends of Hash, right? I'm like, it's funny when people bring rosin to a Legends of Hash. It's better to
well, you know what? We just have to create division. No matter how good anything is, we have to create division. We're human beings. It's impossible not to do. And so if we didn't build a fence and then look over and be like, your grass is different than my grass, we wouldn't be human beings.
That's true. That's true.
It's all in good fun.
Oh yeah, trust me, it's not. It actually gets violent and insane. And some people have made it their mission to make that a big deal. Like, believe it or not, there's some people that are absolutely not just in good fun. They're actually upset and borderline raging Karen style. No offense to anyone named Karen that isn't.
We are here just making jokes, nothing serious.
Yeah.
No, I get all the behind the scenes stuff. So I can let you know that particular joke has more depth than you may know to it. I'm just letting you know. I personally, what I said to Addison when he was telling me about a couple of people who were quite upset about it, because people love to think they know what Legends of Hash is about. But there's only 2 people in this room that actually founded the Legends of Hash dinner. So there's really only 2 people that know what it's about. And it can be about whatever we want it to be about, because it's our event.
And we'll miss you. You won't be there.
Well, I'll be there on video only, and I'm hoping Sam's going to appear as well. Well, at least Sam, I am there.
Yeah, we're so sad that we're not going to be down too. And I just wanted to say, like, because the word division was brought up, and I felt like it was an opportunity to jump in. And I feel like if we're going to be bringing the word cannabis into this, and we're going to be partaking in cannabis, and we talk about polyculture, and we talk about with this plant medicine to evolve out of separatism, to evolve out of this division and diversity. I just think that we can be done with that. And I think that, no, not a reflection at all to what we talked about, just an idea that humanity is using division so much right now. And I just felt like it was a good opportunity to come in and say that polyculture and inclusion with diversity is absolutely important on this planet. And we see that in beautiful farms, and we see that where plants just don't have any maladies or any sicknesses. We see it where there's full health and balance. And I feel like that's where all of humanity needs to head to. And when we look at nature, that's what's happening. And I think that we can do away with that diversity, and we can start seeing each other.
Do away with the division.
Yeah,
add
not diversity. Sorry, do away with the division.
And I would just like to add, we've seen natural people and herbalists and people that do herbal medicine that are really, really healthy. And you don't really get to be that person and go in society in certain places right now, I find that hard to understand. But I give thanks for the journey.
Yeah, and we're just anyway, just let's come together, people. That's the next evolution. The plant has evolution. We talk about the plant's evolution all the time, and we need to talk about our human evolution in this time as well. Love y'all.
Very well put, Kelly. Thank you. And I certainly didn't mean any offense to Flynn or Alice. I just that joke does have more depth to it than most will know. And I say that to people just so they can know that there are people kind of behind the scenes in anything and everything that just want to stir shit up. And so, yeah, do with that as you will. I'm gonna enjoy a dab of some beautiful hash rosin. I hope that I hope that it'll be accepted here on Hash Church, even though it's not rosin.
You got to remember, you got to remember that you can make rosin out of both dry sift hash or dry sift resin or water sifted resin, and you can make rosin out of that. So I guess we've got two categories: dry sift rosin and water sift rosin, and fresh frozen rosin,
and fresh plant rosin. You can just take it off and squish it.
I thought he was going to say
rosin
you could make rosin out of hash, but you can't make hash out of rosin.
Oh,
boom!
Dr. Mark with the mic drop.
Nailed it.
Well, if Frenchie was here, he would find a way for you.
Very much in a thick accent.
French cannoli.
Much love, Kim. Much love, Frenchie. We miss you.
We miss you a lot, indeed. I was actually when you were all discussing the terps, and I was asking if there was a difference between the rosin, the terps in rosin, and the terps in hash. I was thinking of what Frenchie was always saying about press to activate, and going back to the history of hash, that everyone presses hash before they smoke. Like everyone just like making that little ball in their hand, or creating calluses in their hand, just like pressing the hash before smoke, before putting it in a chillum, before putting it in a pipe. And us pressing flags nowadays, like before we dab. So this culture was still lingers. And I was wondering, if you could test that, like if you could just test the sample, like the fresh sample, and then after the hand press, what is the brief change that would happen? I would love to know that. Like,
well, I could tell you this much, that both, and I'm speaking for Marcus, but I think I'm speaking correctly. Both Marcus and I like or cannabinoid content, and it decreased the surface vaporization area.
One thing I would add too, just as a thought, something that we see in fresh plant material before it's gone through drying and curing. There's actually there's almost like a very trace signature of various residual solvents that are endogenously produced solvents that the plant kind of puts out, kind of things like even acetone at very trace levels. But we've been internally discussing kind of creating kind of like a live rosin type certification type. I'm not certification, just almost like stamp, other people are trying to, the whole market is there's just people that want to authenticate basically whenever something's been live or fresh extracted from the plant. And so we've been like we're starting to kind of look at side by sides of and doing trials with various groups of basically measuring kind of terpene content and residual solvent content across various extraction and harvest batches to measure basically what kind of happens and what kind of certain things are being expressed in live plant, as opposed to once the drying process happens. Because even though in the drying process, if you optimally do it, you very much minimize and lock in the total, terpene preservation or profile. But there are these other things that, seem to be happening, like these trace solvent levels, volatilize or go away, kind of in this drying process. And so, trying to understand more about that.
What part of the plant is actually producing? Is it the trichomes that are producing them, or is it other parts of the plant?
It's a really good question. But it does seem like kind of even human body kind of we it's just a natural physiological process within the plant or process within humans is kind of generating these various kind of trace kind of solvents. I'm not a scientist, though, so I don't know anything.
Malberg's work says that trichome accumulation is after it's synthesized in the trichome itself. So he kind of broke down where the cells are that the terpenes are made, where the cells are that the phenols are made, and how they come together in the cannabinoid biosynthetic pathways. I think most of that is actually pretty well worked out.
Plastids and vacuoles.
As far as I know, that's true. It was Kim and Malberg who did that work.
Yep. Yeah, Professor Kim, that's right. That's right. And I think Marcus mentioned an interesting little structure in there, these things called vacuoles, which are basically little storage vesicles within the cell that then migrate to the surface of the trichome.
Are plastids and vacuoles both not organelles?
No, I believe they are.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So one produces phenols, one produces the hydrocarbons, the terpenes. These are the building blocks for cannabinoid production.
Right. Well, it's again, the isoprenoid pathway is endogenous in most plants. It's how the plant builds its cell walls. There's so many different other structures that it uses. It just, it's an economy of carbon that, the plant has figured out over the time course of evolution how to make exactly all the structures that it needs to survive and thrive.
Thank Ja for that.
Alice, in terms of like going from hash to rosin to cured rosin, I would say that there's a distinct difference from one another. However, they resemble one another at the same time. And it's not only in texture, but also the chemical properties that are present because of the curing that's happening. And whatever path you choose on that curing process, whether you choose to add heat or not, will also contribute to those things. So I think there is nuance. However, like art, it's these mediums are very similar to one another. It's on how you approach it.
Awesome.
I want to say this about pressing hash in your hand. It's so fun, you guys, to have a little bit of hash and to be able to press it in a ball and squeeze it and feel it and smell it. I think that joy of doing that gets me more high when I smoke it. You know what I mean? I become intimate with my product and I start to really get excited. So I think I just surf off that. So maybe that's what people do it because we like it. It's fun.
I'm more like, did you wash your hands? Did you?
But I want. Endocannabinoid system, that when we chew our food, the saliva is the very first parts of absorbing it. And when we're working with our herbs and we're touching it and we're putting our DNA into it, and maybe we're even softening it, not even only intentions, who knows what science will do, but of course it's the first part of metabolizing that particular plant, and that
gonna like devote a couple of big trees to just charrising all day, and he's like, it's a lot of work, and we were talking about it for a while, and just really cherishing that that hash and that resin that you get afterwards. So, when you're, Endeavor, there's a lot of really special things you can do to keep the cannabis medicine sacred for you and your community.
I will say this about that. Hashtag never touched. I'll never forget being at a Legends of Hash dinner, and this guy before the dinner came up to my booth and showed me this beautiful piece of like glistening caramel. I was just like, oh my God, it looked like full melt. He had hand rubbed it, right? So I'm like, dude, with that, you get in, you get to buy a ticket. So he ended up at Legends. I never knew this guy. He was a total random stranger I met and just was like, this guy needs to be at Legends. He hand rubbed like 10 grams of fucking hash. So we go to Legends. I'm sitting with Todd McCormick and his buddy Emilio, who owns the Trippy Stick company, the vaporizer company. So these guys are like, they meet him right away because he sits at our table. He doesn't know anyone else there except me. And he's like, hey guys, try some of this. And so they put a little bit in their Trippy Stick. And I also tasted it. And I have to admit, like, I don't know if he was warm and sweaty, but it tasted like feet. Like it was we laugh about it to this day. Like it was so bad. I was just like, oh my God, like Etienne, you probably might've been there and you, if not, you definitely have heard this story, but.
Well, I've heard the story of it tasting like absolute human.
Dude, trust me, and I'm not like making this up. I was like stoked for the guy. The hash looked beautiful. It was completely void of any plant matter contaminant, but I'm telling you, this was not a terpene profile. Like this was some human interaction.
Not only was it low in terpenes, but it was low in THC.
Yeah, but it was high in BO.
Well, I'd like to take my hash and my keef together and smoke them together. So I kind of like, why not both?
You know what? I can appreciate Debbie's making the hash. I used to love playing with hash, and that's a great way to sort of put nervous energy into just rolling up a piece of hash. But I'll tell you, that guy at that Legends ruined it for me. Now I'm just like, ooh, don't touch the hash, like hashtag never touch. Don't touch it. Oh, can I touch that? No, you can't touch the hash. That's just me. I appreciate what Josh and Kelly were saying too.
I don't know if when you were in India, Marcus, if the Indian police were checking. We were up in the Himalayas and they were checking the sadhus' hands to see if they had hash calluses on them. If you'd been rubbing hash and you had a horseshoe-shaped callus on both of your hands, then they would hassle you and maybe threaten to arrest you or,
brutal.
Use it. And I had one for, 6 months.
Growing up in rural Louisiana, when I was a kid, we'd get pulled over by the cops and they would ask to smell our fingers. I didn't know why, because I didn't smoke pot because it was all joints back in the day. Turns out they were smelling our fingers to smell if we were out in the cane field smoking joints.
Damn. You guys living under
and big to not love. Well, two things about India. I mean, they repealed the farm bill in India, which is really huge. The farmers have been fighting for their rights as farmers and food producers in India for well over a year now, and it's a phenomenal movement of human power and Vandana Shiva and all the work that's gone into small farmers producing better quality stuff at a larger rate. There's a lot of really good teachings in there, so that's really important. But also on the cannabis front in India, it's really bad right now, and they're just mowing down fields all over India right now and trapping people. And the laws are really, really bad in India. And we're going to have a conversation with Hemfati later on tonight or in the next couple of days. She lives in Milana. She's been in Milana for the last 2 years. Beautiful woman, doing incredible work. And, she's just been really wanting to get people's attention onto, what's happening in India is pretty severe on the cannabis front right now. So everyone heads up if there's anything you can do out there, to make some change, or someone in the realm, it's an important thing right now, because we're talking about origins and we're talking about respecting your elders and cultures of where it came from. And now some of those places are under fire and they're just taking brush cutters and just mowing down giant fields and stuff, and it's pretty hardcore. So
well, Medical cannabis.
Sorry, they're targeting Indian celebrities too. I see that they're taking down all these people at the high levels to just scare the crap out of everyone in India. It makes no sense when the rest of the globe is moving in another direction, yet here one of our places of origin for the cannabis plant is behaving like that. It's anti-scientific, anti-logical as far as I'm concerned.
In Germany this week, I mean, look at Germany. Germany's going to legalize cannabis, which is a huge signifier for the EU. But at the same time, going back to what Michael Krawitz and a group I'm working with at the United Nations are doing, I mean, we already got cannabis removed from Schedule 4. So actually medical cannabis is legal, and Indians could be fighting at the UN regarding international specifically. And we're going to
medical cannabis groups in India.
And we will also be back in Vienna in March working on drug policy as well. We're going to have a group of us in New York and a group of us in Vienna. So we're working on
that other country,
plan.
that other country that we hear about in the news a lot these days, China? Do you know what China's policy is towards cannabis?
Not friendly.
Don't get caught with it.
Yeah, they got in touch with Canada's government and said, we don't want our citizens using medical marijuana, using recreational marijuana, like made a statement, government to government, about Chinese kids.
But it's okay for the synthetic labs over there to basically be making fentanyl and dumping it in Mexico, where it basically comes through the border and ends up in basic, well, yeah, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. Like when we had that Chinese or the Japanese fella there who was looking at what, like 30 years for smoking a joint or something like that. Makes no sense at all when you consider all of the business, the picks and shovels businesses that are in China and that are in Japan that are greatly benefiting from what's happening with cannabis across the globe.
30 years for a joint. It's a good thing he wasn't smoking a bong. They would have given him 50.
Japan's really strict. And it's interesting because
Martin in Singapore just got I think a death penalty for 2 pounds of weed just recently.
And but Kyle,
that's fascinating that China took
the most, right? Don't you think?
I think that's really fascinating that China took that approach just as such a like autocratic and control kind of because cannabis, and I would imagine all the other psychoactive entheogenic plants and plant medicines of around the world are so subversive to their narrative, and and you see how much
legal
these plants,
in an autocracy. In an autocracy, they need to control the way people think. And if people can basically grow their own medicine and think for themselves, an autocracy can't exist. So it does get political.
But what makes you, like, when you're just kind of looking at the world cannabis economy, right? You're looking at the world cannabis economy. You're like, I need to make a bit of money. What makes you think, like, you know what? I'm going for Singapore. It's the biggest bang for my buck. It's like, no, listen, just not even making a joke. These motherfuckers are not fucking around. They have giant zero tolerance, signs, death penalty, like the whole 9 yards. Like, I wouldn't even go renew my visa there when I was in Thailand. People were like, we're all going down to Singapore to renew our visas. And I'm like, oh, well, have fun with that. Like, I smoke hash every single day. Like, it's probably on me right now, stuck to me somewhere that I don't even know. If not, for sure, I have enough in my bloodstream to get like 20 or 30 years. So I never
have to worry.
It was amazing, Mark.
The whole world is changing. Okay. Who knows? Before long, even Malaysia might be growing marijuana for people as medicine. Anything's possible.
At the MJ BizCon in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, I did meet a couple folks from mainland China who are mostly over looking at CBD and CBD type products, but they were absolutely floored. I don't think they expected to see the level of THC products that there are available. And so these guys, I think if I had them characterized right, they own a bunch of bodegas in New York City, the New York City area, I think mostly like Queens and Brooklyn. And these bodegas are basically, small little, shops to get sandwiches, sodas, bags of chips and stuff like that. but they sell everything. They sell newspapers, they sell all kinds of stuff. And so now they want to basically start selling CBD, but they were totally adamant, like it's been put into their head that, you know, any THC associated with these products is totally bad. And I think it's because of their culture and it's because of where they come from. But I think now they recognize the financial opportunity that exists. And now they're probably going to go back to their folks and say, hey, man, we can make CBD and or sell CBD products, but ultimately people see, let's, you know, people want
cannabis.
And so they were really interested in HHC and Delta 8 and all these other, you know, non-THC cannabinoids. But as soon as you mention THC, it's like, oh, put the brakes on that. We're not into, can't, no, can't do that. No full spectrum anything, only these other things. So
well, that's what's so magical about this plant too. It's so subversive just by its nature, you know, and so alluring for all these ways that, you know, also, you know, are, you know, ultimately kind of persuade one group or another. But, you know, I think like whenever it really comes to so much of the potential of this plant, the greatness really comes in the phytoremediation that this plant can do and potentiate and accelerate. And I think as a strategic national resource and strategic global resource, as you know, as this, you know, just information comes more and more, I mean, just the, you know, the necessity that every country, you know, for their own sustainability has to kind of clean up and, you know, restore their soil is, you know, I mean, you know, ultimately hemp's going to win and hopefully help subvert the whole kind of brainwash out there.
A free enterprise itself. These are Chinese businessmen. They just want to make money. That's all they care about is return on investment, return on. And so I think in their mind, they're re-educating themselves based on what they see in the US market. They have people walking into those stores asking for Delta 8 products, asking for CBD products. So all they know is that there's a market. We better go to this trade show, line up some supply chain agreements, start getting those products into our 150 bodegas that we have in and around the New York City area, because this is just going to be like, this isn't going away, right? Yeah. And the interesting thing again is that if you look at what's happening with some of the minor cannabinoids, it's taking a different route in every state, because some states are outright banning, you know, Delta 8 and banning HHC and all these other things that you can make. But other states are choosing to regulate those underneath their Delta 9 licenses. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, because it's almost like there's a different program, a different regulatory structure in every state.
Hey, Dr. Mark, since, you know, so we hung out at MJ Biz, and I wanted to ask you, because I knew that the Delta 8 was going to come down in the federal ruling, and they were going to start to allow this. And we both kind of share the same ideology. It seems that it's extremely dangerous to do things like that. How do you feel that ruling affects where, you know, the hemp industry is at today, allowing Delta 8 to be now in the supply chain?
Well, first of all, it's only made possible through the ridiculousness of prohibition itself, right? So if Delta 9 wasn't prohibited, there would be no market for Delta 8.
Yep.
Delta 8 is just because, well, okay, people want to get high.
Because the DEA.
CBD, but these people could basically make CBD like there's no tomorrow, finding out that there's no market for it. They convert it now to THC, in this case, Delta 8, and now you can get people high. Here's an interesting trend. You're starting to see people making Delta 9 from hemp, and they think it's legal. But in my mind, and again, maybe not just my mind, but I think the way the law works is that, you know, the exclusion of THC in the Controlled Dangerous Substance Act has tetrahydrocannabinols, including Delta 8, including dronabinol, including Delta 9. They're all categorized under code 7370. And while I don't agree with first or Schedule 1 listing of THC because it's not dangerous, so it doesn't need to be controlled, that's where the government has it, like it or not. And until they move it out of there, you need a THC license to sell these products legally. Now, the conundrum is that they're all being made from hemp-derived starting material. So you have hemp processors largely operating in an unregulated environment with no regulatory oversight whatsoever. In the most cannabis unfriendly states like Tennessee and Alabama and Mississippi, but even in cannabis friendly states, in Colorado, for example, there are a lot of hemp processors now who are making these other cannabinoids because there's a market for them. But a lot of that market, again, I don't think it was ever the intention of Congress when they passed the Farm Bill to enable the production of a psychoactive substance. That's why they put the whole thing about THC, it had to be 0.3%. I don't think the intellectual furnaces were burning hot enough to understand that Meshulam and Adams and all these other people, well, they figured out you could convert CBD to THC. We knew that because we knew the literature. And I was like, well, this is just waiting to happen. I started seeing then HHC, and everybody started bringing my phone off the hook saying, hey, aren't you the guy that patented hydrogenation? How could these guys be so what they were doing is they're now converting their Delta 8, which again, remember is code 7370 on controlled dangerous substance. It says you need a license. The license of those businesses is all under mostly vertically integrated Delta 9 business. Delta 8's probably fine, and HHC is probably fine too. But the way it's being produced right now is probably not the safest for human consumption. I think that things are moving along pretty quickly, but we have a patent on HHCA, not on HHC. And so all these HHC producers, I think, are just taking their Delta 8, which again is listed in the Controlled Dangerous Substance Act, hydrogenating it, converting it to HHC. And people seem to really like HHC. The HHC introduction, at least across the hemp markets, has been pretty successful. These guys are making a lot of money selling it. And yeah, that's it.
Well, out here, we're not seeing in the Bay Area, at least, those CBD shops all around. Like I've seen other places when I've left town because we got dispensaries everywhere. And they just changed the state law that's going to say now we can sell at dispensaries the hemp-derived CBD and what's other Delta 8. But they haven't finished putting the regulations in, but I'm pretty sure that's just because they want to take the tax off the top of that.
But that's pretty big. That's a pretty big decision, right, Debbie?
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of like, I think from what I understand, tell me if I'm correct here. So the thing that the Charlotte's Web people tried to do federally with the FDA in allowing CBD from industrial hemp to be allowed as a new dietary ingredient or new dietary supplement. No, I think Gavin Newsom said, fuck you. Yeah, that in California to get these minor cannabinoids to market. Is that right, Debbie?
Yeah, I think that is right. They just haven't put the regulatory scheme together yet, so we don't know what it's going to look like when they start showing up at our shops or how we're going to be able to sell it or anything like that yet. But yeah, I think California is doing the smart decision, bucking sort of that federal trend and just doing what needs to be done. So we're surprised. I didn't even know it was happening. So just one day the ruling came out.
Yeah, and a little background on that too. And before we get into that, like Mark, one point you were me bringing up though, because there's all the CBD shops, kind of that are everywhere, but you like Delta 8 cartridges and HHC cartridges and stuff, you can go into most head shops, kind of just like random kind of bodega style, kind of like some vape shops or head shops, and you find them pretty accessibly, way beyond kind of just the centralized CBD shops that pop up, just really selling CBD type products, and so that's a whole fascinating issue and dilemma. And that's going to play out in interesting ways. But on the hemp bill, it's been really fascinating because, for the last, many years now, 2 or 3 years, there's, been basically the hemp bill that tried to get pushed through, kind of really without any regard to public health and safety under the guise of industrial hemp, kind of just kind of having testing regulations around THC, which seemed really as a trippy kind of big ag subversion type of the whole space. And California farmers in the licensed space were like, homie, don't play that. And basically shot it down each year, because, how and why do people growing the same plant, because most people who are growing industrial hemp are not growing industrial hemp. 95% of those people are growing type 3 drug cultivars of cannabis, and under the guise of industrial hemp, but are growing it that much more in industrial agricultural areas where there's that much more contamination potential of pesticides and metals and all these things. And so, kind of there's wildly kind of unregulated use of the word hemp and what it's actually being used for, whether it's medicine drug supply chain or whether it's like actual industrial fiber for, processing into all these other things. And so California kind of this year passed, AB 45 to establish, kind of for the first time cannabis, or hemp products in the licensed supply chain, and kind of essentially allowing for, kind of other states to get, kind of CBD products into the state. But they put in place a level of parity with the kind of, cannabis testing regulations for licensed cannabis, with regard to all these points on public health and safety. And so it's a huge step forward, and there, that's going to be, playing out. And I think that's really going to help set a national standard for at which hemp should be tested. Especially if it's going to be made into like medicine supply chain for pediatric epilepsy kids, cancer patients, dietary supplement world of, kind of, these cannabinoids. But the, it's hardly kind of on the same playing field or level with regard to, kind of, batch requirement. I mean, there's kind of testing requirements in place, but there's not really a, supply chain, regulated supply chain, in any way for hemp.
Do you guys have an analytical standard for HHC, Alec?
No.
Okay.
I would love to talk with you more about that. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your insight. Also, you have a very nuanced, very specific understanding of this whole thing that is really far beyond.
I've been running around the internet basically correcting all these bogus articles that people are writing on. And hopefully it'll set the ground straight, and people will say, okay, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. Here's what this is, right? Because there's all kinds of speculation on what it is out there, and people just don't know.
One thing I wanted to say real quick, and I'm sorry, Colin, if you were about to speak up, but it's funny, this whole conversation around these conversions. We, from the whole community of extract artists, we've been catching a lot of shit for a long time and losing a lot of really good business with people that we would show a test result with accurate chromatography and show people at like 40% delta 9 in their distillate, or kind of whatever, right? But you see these huge peaks of these compounds beyond delta 8, because we identify delta 8, but delta 10, all these other kind of whatever state of the art isomer that there are around.
It's no,
but it was now there's a whole.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, now there's we're catching shit about not doing it right, and people kind of just going to labs that would misidentify those peaks as delta 9. But now it's just funny because now there's this starting to be widespread understanding of, oh, you could actually through distillation process create all these isomers, and now there's these widespread these other high.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the funny thing is that you hear fear mongering in the blogs of people who don't know what they're talking about all these unknowns in there, all unknowns. It's like, well, if you read the chemical literature like I do, I can tell you that they're not unknown at all. In fact, they're quite known. It's known exactly what's made in this reaction. And so like when you do this conversion of CBD to THC, it generates non-natural isomers that aren't formed in the plant. They all have the same molecular weight, 314, and certainly in the testing labs that I've talked to about this and the samples that I've seen, those compounds are in unless you have this figured out, they're in all of these mixtures, and we really don't know what their long-term impact is to human safety. So we just don't know because they're not made by the plant, and this is the first time they're being made for human consumption. And so it'll be interesting to see if folks who are producing this are able to not only quantify what those isomers are, but basically set product specification limits. So you know that if a batch has got 2%, well, 2% is no good, but we need to be down at 0.5 or whatever the cutoff is on some of these. But until they do the safety assessments on these compounds, this is just a guessing game.
So that was kind of my question to Alec, I guess, was do we have the ability to even test for these isomers and differentiate them from one another to then call them out, right? Say, okay, well, this is now present, so this is most likely.
So you know, it's I think the burden of proving these compounds is on the manufacturers creating them more than it's on the lab to like identify these novel compounds and see if like the, you know, kind of the trends of where the market's creating isomers to be able to quantify. You know, I think that requires a lot of R&D work in, you know, with the laboratory to help, you know, be able to, you know, identify what the compounds are that the group's creating, you know. Then like let, you know, wheat labs can kind of, you know, stay up to date on kind of having these compounds added into their methods and validated. You know, but again, I think, you know, it's funny because in the past we've kind of caught so much shit from clients, you know, that basically are like, this distillate is 40% THC, you know, you're wrong. You know, what is this other 60%? And it's like, dude, it's a novel compound. It's like this ghost cannabinoid isomer that you've created. I have no idea what it is. There's not a standard for it. Like I can show you a chromatogram that it's clearly that, and it's not Delta 9, you know, but we're testing for these compounds like Delta 9 that we have validated and tested hundreds of thousands of times, you know. And so I think that there's like, you know, novel work that needs to be done with kind of manufacturers that are making these compounds to be able to kind of, you know, again, burden of proofs on them.
Do at that stage when they've just made 20 kilos of this stuff, they want it to be 40 or 80%, or they want it to be some ungodly,
exactly.
It's some ungodly low percent, and it's got all this other crap in there. They're like, oh, let's just, you know, white film distill it and put it in gummies, you know. And I think, again, I'd like to think that there's a place for chemists to play in the industry, and I think it's like, if your process doesn't make something that's greater than 90% yield, it ain't ready for prime time. Unless you know what that other 10% is, and you can ascribe that other 10% to known compounds or bridge to known compounds of known safety, then you don't have a safe product there. So whether it's Delta 8 or whether it's HHC, these are no longer naturally occurring in a plant, and you can't refine a plant extract to get those compounds. You're talking about a reaction product of a chemical reaction. And I don't know about you, I hope that it's a chemist like me running that chemical reaction that knows what the hell it is they're doing.
Yeah, truth.
Yeah. I think sort of the hilarity of all of this, and if we look at it from, you know, an outward standpoint of how, you know, the brains of human beings, we've fractaled this medicine so much. We've created so many different laws and so many different regulations. And because humans are adaptogens, then we're always trying to jump through the hoops of the regulations. And I just think it's so hilarious that this plant continues to be fractaled out in all of these different ways, so we can jump through all the hoops that we're creating, so that we can even create hoops that we can't jump through anymore. I just think that it's pretty funny that this plant is so adaptogenic in the way that we are in our thinking, that we've come up with all these different ways that just really don't make any sense. But hey, they got through a hoop.
I really appreciate that thought. You know, it reminds me I was at an International Cannabinoid Research Society conference one year, and you know, there's all these amazing presentations and knowledge transfer and all this, and then there was this like, you know, PhD, like super tenured DEA like chemist that was presenting about this like cat and mouse game that the DEA is having, and this really big problem that there's all these synthetic cannabinoids that are hitting the market. And like they'll, you know, spice and K2 and all these things. And then like the only way they'll even kind of find out about them is through some widespread kind of outbreak of like some really adverse reaction. And then they all of a sudden kind of test that supply, identify this way crazy new compound, synthetic cannabinoid, and then they schedule it. And then by the time they've scheduled it, then there's new compounds on the market. And it's this whole and they're like presenting this dilemma, this cat and mouse game that they're having. It's so hard. And it's like, and the whole time, the whole kind of people, everybody in the audience is just like staring at them like pissed, because it's like, it's the prohibition on this plant that's creating the market for all these super fractal kind of like, you know, almost like dystopian, like just like way off the plant's kind of path of what this, you know, of cannabinoids to hit the market. But you know, they're doing it anyway, and it's making it out there. You know, so many of the synthetic ones are like really gnarly. You know, I'd be curious about like long-term efficacy for Delta 8 or HHC and all that. You know, and it's probably good. It's probably fine. You know, compared to some of these crazy synthetic cannabinoids. But again, yeah, it's like, it's just so trippy because it's the prohibition on this plant that's like leading to all this divergence from the path. You know, instead of, you know, being able to actually cherish the like magic that the plant actually presents if you just give it the chance.
Yeah, but the feds have that law, the blanket law, the analog law that says that anything that is a spinoff from a drug, a Schedule 1 is a Schedule 1 drug. But the thing is it's like that toothpaste out of the tube thing. What are they going to do? Come after everyone at this point? That like we've literally outnumbered the DEA and the feds so hardcore, they can never get it back in. The toothpaste will never, ever go back in the tube at this point. Never. It's over.
I think this is just all part of the movement to deschedule the plant and to take THC off the list. You know, it flies in the face of conventional knowledge that there are several FDA approved drugs where cannabinoids that are from the plant are the active ingredients in those drugs. They have a good therapeutic index, they have low toxicity, yet the plant from which they're derived has no medical value. Come on.
And that's been happening since, you know, even LSD and Hoffman and Owsley Stanley and Nick Sand, who were making LSD in the 60s.
Tim Scully.
And Tim Scully. A lot of people don't know about Tim Scully, which is not Rock Scully.
Legend.
And you know, just talking about how, you know, there's early crystal that was made, you know, during a time when it was legal, and then the FDA or the government started going after it, and then they said, oh, we were trying to produce ALD 52. You know, and they're like, hey, come on, this was LSD 25, you know, so, you know, and these people went on to like do other amazing labs all over the place. So for sure, you know, that's the chemist, you know, you just heat it up and realm.
And it's also
that's been a very fruitful area.
I just want to say,
I was just going to say, it's been a very fruitful area in general to look at inspiration from biology. So when you look at the compounds that biology produces, that's where a lot of our pharmaceuticals and drugs are discovered. They're discovered by making analogs around those pharmaceuticals, or those what typically in drug discovery they call privileged platforms. So a privileged platform is just a molecule like a cannabinoid that no matter what groups you decorate on it, it's going to have some level of activity. The great thing about cannabinoids, just in terms of their therapeutic index, is that they're ultimately not toxic. So a lot of these compounds, especially the compounds that were developed by pharmaceutical companies to act on the cannabinoid receptors, not only are they toxic as hell, but they have a lot of non-specific interactions. They interact not just with the cannabinoid receptors, but with every receptor in the body. And so you can't just throw a monkey wrench into the engine of your body and expect it not to have any deleterious impact. That's the great thing about the phytocannabinoid skeleton in general, is that, you know, it's very lipid soluble. And so because our bodies have a lot of fat, especially my body, that fat is basically reservoirs to hold, just like a dirty bong, those cannabinoids inside your body as long as we possibly can. So our body has actually evolved mechanisms to hold on to these compounds because they're so beneficial. And the last thing I'll say is that unlike most antioxidants in our diet, like the polyphenols in coffee and grape juice and shit like that, unlike those types of antioxidants, those are water soluble. Cannabinoids are not water soluble, so indefinitely they protect the fatty tissues of your body from oxidative damage caused by free radicals. So again, it's been said many times before, cannabis use, all use is medical because you're protecting the fatty tissues of your body, including your pancreas, your brain, and your kidneys, against from radical mediated oxidative damage. So these things are going to be looked as a new supplement in the future because it's going to lead to healthier humans.
I'd love to follow up.
Jump in about you said something about a monkey wrench, and I just wanted to say that when we're talking about pharmaceuticals and them extracting certain compounds, and those compounds that have been maybe isolated and studied, and then that's what's being put inside of the human, well, that lacks the full spectrum, that lacks the full thing. So what we're also finding is when we're synthesizing and when we're isolating that like that, without the full absorption of the full plant, we're actually creating more maladies and more side effects with these drugs because we failed to look at the whole integration of all of the different compounds within the drugs. And that's just pointing out, you know, more hoops that we like to put up for ourselves, and how funny that is, and how it does.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up on both of those great points. You know, like you know, and a big shout out to ethnobotany and the legendary ethnobotanists of the past, you know, that have kind of really helped to carry this coveted wisdom about the medicinal properties of plants to Western world, which has kind of been the foundation of so much of the modern pharmaceutical kind of compounds created. You know, so many of the antihistamines that we use and are around really are kind of foundationally kind of tied to like datura and toa and brugmansia and kind of scopolamine kind of related type compounds and stuff. And it goes so far beyond that, you know, aspirin and, you know, just the root of so much of the medicines that pharmaceutical uses is pretty much all is you know, found in plant, you know, foundations. And so, you know, you know, there's this really amazing podcast I would highly recommend from the great ethnobotanist Dr. Mark Plotkin, called Plants of the Gods, you know, kind of name and tribute to, you know, great Albert Hoffman and Richard Evans Schultes that wrote the book together back in the day. But there's a podcast called Plants of the Gods that kind of, you know, from a really amazing kind of biocultural conservational aspect, kind of tributes plants and the people where these plants kind of, you know, kind of come from, and in, you know, and just really, really beautiful narrative. Over time, and you know, a lot more in all in and in service to that path than the pharmaceutical discovery path, to start just like randomly kind of start plugging at receptors, in that way of hacking into the systems that are already perfectly figured out. But anyway, just want to share that.
I'm glad you did. I just went and followed that podcast.
It's an amazing podcast. It really is. And if you ever get a chance, I think he's either got a TED Talk or there's a YouTube of a talk that he gave. His photographs are fucking amazing. He has some of the most amazing photographs of the Amazon that I've ever seen.
Sweet.
It's just sort of cool to remind ourselves that no matter what we have created in the name of science or whatever we have manipulated as far as carbon or as far as any kind of compounds, it's all of the earth. Everything that we have manipulated, and it's all come from the earth, even like the plastics. Yes, they're not naturally occurring, but everything is of the earth. And I just think that that's just a really interesting thing, that of course, all of our medicinals would come from the plants because they're of the earth. Everything would be coming of the earth. So of course, we've figured out ways to synthesize it and make it unhealthy for us. And that's been really awesome in pharmacopoeia.
You're blowing my secret ingredient, stardust, right? We put stardust in the really special stuff. Right. We're not importing feedstocks from Mars, not yet, right?
Not yet.
Although who knows, right?
And I love the work of Alexander Sasha Shulgin and all of the compounds
Yeah,
that he
bless his
created.
soul for sure.
Yeah, blessings on him, of course. If you're going to talk about psychoactive drugs and different, I mean, how many did he make? And I think he was in the, trying them all and just really supporting all of the doctors throughout all these years. You don't know it, but like Alexander Shulgin is just right there, in court cases and studies and stuff, and give thanks for some of the medicines that were created there for sure.
He wasn't.
Yeah,
there's still a whole lot of work to do there. Really, there is.
Right.
Again, that's
and
like
it is fascinating.
so his two textbooks, right? Tryptamines and phenethylamines. These are again privileged platforms that you could decorate with just about any molecular spinach you want. You're only limited by the imagination of the chemist, right? And so you could put a group over here, see what it does, take a few pills. Oh, that makes me feel tired.
And he did.
Let's put another group over here, and really do your own SAR.
And
P-Cal and
you know what?
T-Cal.
Yep, P-Cal and T-Cal. What's fascinating is I think those are the two divergent paths really with the plants. It's like this ethnobotanical, like biocultural conservation, like supporting the communities where the medicines come from and understanding how to use them most effectively in reverence to the plant and to the people where they come from. And then also this world of discovery and kind of like being able to kind of create these novel compounds in this Shulgin kind of tribute and path, and some of my favorite, medicines like 2CV, kind of are Shulgin compounds. And I think in this other kind of side of this compound, which is relevant to our conversation, is synthetic cannabinoids and all these HHC kind of delta 8, delta 10 kind of stuff. It's kind of there's this, and this is this creation potential of kind of being able to hack the kind of the molecular kind of understanding of the endocannabinoid system and tryptamines and dopamine system and all this, and be able to create compounds that can fit into these pathways. But I do also believe that very strongly that there's an incredible, again, burden of proof that is on those people that are making these compounds, and especially if they're going to be making them readily and accessibly available, to prove efficacy and and efficacy and safety, first and foremost, before kind of there's this rapid release, because I think, there's, Shulgin's really the only dude that did it really right, I think in his world. And I think people that took kind of Shulgin kind of paths with the endocannabinoid system to create all these novel, kind of synthetic cannabinoids that have kind of gone to lead to all these outbreaks of just public health issues, kind of did Shulgin a disservice, kind of in that, because they were just, they weren't creating the molecule and dosing themselves and figuring out the thing and then like putting that out very responsibly. They were just like creating batches and like dosing the population, and that's pretty apt.
The other thing is that we don't look at the long-term effects of this. What Shulgin put out is he definitely had mass peer studies, but he's just one man in an adult life creating pretty phenomenal things and massive peer review studies that were on his own. And I just feel like here it is again that we're putting shackles on the possibility and the educational attributes of plant medicine when we continuously try to regulate them, because what would it be like? What kind of a society would we be if we were readily able to use coca leaves every day in our teas that would help, lift us for our days, rather than have to party on the weekends with this super
Crazy
synthetic extract. And we don't look at the longevity of that. If we were able to totally free that up, I feel like it would lessen the need for us to continue to synthesize these things that would be more normalized in our own tea cabinet, that we would have, concentrated sassafras bark that we were taking every day, especially for the rainy days that, MDMA is made out of, that we could get that maybe in a chewing gum or whatever.
Canary grass or San Pedro cactuses.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like there's
so it's just interesting.
Straight to the tea, straight to the old world. You know what I mean?
And I think that creates more the longevity.
Yeah.
And
that's the longevity. That's the blue zone. That's the ultimate, lift of the spirit. I think
coca leaf to cocaine is such a good example. Coca leaf that is revered for thousands of years as one of the highest preyed upon, appreciated plants across the Andes. Is the divine leaf of immortality. And kind of the longevity of that is real. And how much that medicine of a plant it is. As opposed to the cursed kind of extracted, way overused, way overly kind of self-gratifying, way like ego building. I mean, it's totally different. It's a totally different
night
thing.
And day. Those are not the same things at all.
It's like it's like I've heard it described as coca is to potato as cocaine is to vodka.
Right.
Yeah, that's about right.
When I was married, which was long ago, I was married to an Andean man. He was Peruvian, and coca is actually symbiotic with their bodies. They're one. The plant and their bodies are the same. And lately, I've been thinking about, for example, mushrooms, because here I live in Oakland. It's legalized here locally, and I've been doing microdoses. So great. But I did a microdose and I didn't take time to develop my set and setting and my mindset, because I've been doing it regular, right? And I was like, oh, I'll just do a microdose, and I did it on the fly. It bit me in the butt so hard, because that is a sacred plant and you really have to watch your headspace and you have to use it in a certain way. So I'm curious, as we unveil these things, how many people are going to get in trouble sort of physically or mentally not treating these plants with the kind of respect like the Andean Peruvians do, where they're symbiotic with the coca plant. It's part of their body and their whole life view. And the same with mushrooms. That's a sacred plant. That's not something you take just like aspirin. That is different. So
they teach you,
one of us
right?
Finds out in our own way, right? You found out in your way.
Oh, I got my butt. It's been a while, believe me.
The same way as they find out by eating cannabis. Start off small and work your way up. It's not something where you just
that is it.
Bar,
I couldn't believe it. Novice mistake. I was thinking I'm a professional, 30 years doing this. What the hell? And it got me. But yeah, it did get my brain wrapped around this kind of sacred plant set and setting thing a lot clearer. So I was very appreciative for the lesson.
I think people's definitions of a microdose is not all on the same. Because like to me, I hear people going, well, a microdose is like 0.1. And I'm like, 0.1, hey, like that's okay, I think you could catch a buzz off that though. Like, and other people are doing much smaller amounts. So I think that data needs to get put together so people can kind of all be on the same page. What is an accurate microdose? Because to me, a microdose is, there's no psychedelic effect. There's no like butterflies in your stomach. There's no nothing. You could literally, like, honestly just go about your day. But what you're talking about is like something different. The old, I thought I was a professional, and now I'm like, how long is this going to be for again? Like,
No, I really appreciate that thought actually too, because that's one of the, within the world of cannabis, kind of when testing came along, the biggest thing it really helped to change and level the game up on was being able to start to get towards a standardized dose, especially when you're making manufactured products or edibles or microdosing things, because that's such a great point, kind of, what was it, a 0.1 or a 0.2? Was it, kind of albino penis envy, or was it this other type of variety, and so I think, the identification of what even or just, if there's an agreement on a microdose is 0.1, it's like, is that, that could vary very much between varieties, and so kind of, I think, cannabis in such a way, what's really cool, just a random thought I've been working on for a minute is, everybody's freaking out like we're in the apocalypse, and the apocalypse, the literal definition of the word is time of revelation or the great unveiling, and in so many ways I can't help but feel that plants are the horsemen of this apocalypse, with cannabis and hemp at the lead, that are helping set the path forward, because you just see this rapid path of these other compounds and these other plants and fungi kind of following lead in an accelerated way, but they're, these plants and compounds and, kind of companion partner teacher plants, that are helping to empower us with all the tools we need to make it through this time of revelation, in the most empowered and lifted way towards this ascension path,
Well, Alec, you really, that's really important. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think that there's something, we're trying to unwrap in the cannabis industry, this discussion around potency, that we all know it's not just THC. We know there's a whole synergistic thing going, but I feel like the missing conversation there is the set and setting is endogenous setting means. We think of set and setting as all these things that are around us, but it's how the things around us influence our own internal chemistry, right? And certain cannabinoids and certain compounds, certain psychedelics and stuff really stimulate our own. I mean, anyone who's taken psychedelics knows that as soon as it already starts, right? You start building that up because you have that anticipation. And the same thing with cannabis. There's certain cannabis varieties that stimulate your endogenous chemical factory, and they interact. Like, I feel like there's these three intersecting lines of cannabinoids, terpenes, and endogenous compounds, and where they intersect is where the potency lies. And a big part of that is knowing, like, hey, there's a certain set and setting that is going to react to these particular chemicals and create this other high. And now that we're in the pandemic, the set and setting has changed so much. And for me in my life, my set and setting around cannabis completely shifted because, for one, I'm not with my homies anymore. I'm in my home office with my family on the other side of the wall. It's a totally different relationship with the same plant. And I think that there's something there, that there's certain varieties that really trigger anxiety in certain people if their set and setting isn't right. But at the same time, those same varieties are the ones that stimulate that intense psychoactive experience if your set and setting is right. And people have kind of steered away from those varieties because they don't want to take the chance of having an adverse reaction, where they need to really, that's like riding that razor's edge of where the chemicals outside and the chemicals inside are in complete harmony. That's that whole human plant experience.
That's really brilliant.
To be honest, there is no one potency, because some people,
that's where we get an old world. Oh, sorry.
Some people think potency is physical. Some people think it's mental. So there is no one potency any more than there's one cannabis for everybody. There isn't. There can be things that people prefer, And a lot of people prefer very different things.
The most miscommon ask people reach out to me for specifically when looking for something medicinally is they're looking for a cannabis that works specifically for their issue. It is still a dominant misinformation that's being perpetuated, because when I make them aware that it's completely subjective, and what if you and I can have the same condition, what works for you won't work for me and vice versa, that's mind-blowing to them. They can't understand that we have to go along the same process of trial and error for you to find out what works for you. There's no magic one of Sam and all those guys have not created that one magic asthma bud, the one cancer that's the one thing. What specifically for this cancer that I could use? And the most frustrating thing that I have to tell them is we don't know. We don't understand. You're going to have to try it by trial and error, document it. I have them definitely write it down in a notebook and, document how they feel when they take it. What did they eat? Were they feeling? When was onset and when did it finish? So that later on they can get it, because they're in the experience. Later they need to understand, or their caretaker or person working with them or their doctor is very helpful to take that information so they can show what you're using, how much you're using, what you're using it for, how much dosage, and how much is and how long is it lasting for. Those are all very helpful, and all decision makers that you find in what works for you. So I agree that psychedelics are just as subjective as cannabis, and what would work for Debbie for a microdose could be a potential heroic dose for someone else, and a microdose for someone else turns out to be a heroic dose for Debbie. So, it's still rather fascinating, but the most frustrating thing to say is, even after all this, and honestly, is we don't know.
And I think that Mojave, what you were just saying, and also Alec, is that this has always been known, because even when you go to traditional people that dish out the medicine, that prepare the medicine for you, they hold the space, they clear the energy, they cast the spell. All of that is protection for your spirit. It's protection for organisms with this plant. So they're creating a space for you to be able to have a safe relationship. For lack of better words, they're creating soft padding so that your relationship and they create a mediation. So the epigenetics and the situation and the cast and the set and setting is just all a part of that same thing that we talk about with the ancient settings of casting a spell.
And Maria Sabina, Mexico, and look up Maria Sabina as one person who's done amazing work with cubensis and Palenque and that whole zone. Also, just compounding medicines is really crucial, and I think with microdosing especially, it's the compounding psychedelic, the mushrooms with other supportive herbs in a capsule form, so that you can kind of say, oh, I'm going to take the same amount of capsule with all these other supportive herbs so that my liver's not too toxed out if I'm going to take it, for a whole year, or, the kidneys don't.
Setting, which is the protection as well. You want to be able to look towards not only the elders who have held the medicine, but also the elder herbs who have also been compounded together forever and ever. They also help hold the set and setting of what you're taking to create more of a protection of you having a relationship with that plant.
I really appreciate that. Something I'd love to add in, kind of, which it's a good conversation, kind of ties both of these topics in with what you were bringing up, Mojave, kind of about that, like the endogenous lead up to the kind of overall potency of an experience, because it's so true across kind of plants and kind of the traditions we're using, these contexts of that we're using these plants, and to Debbie, your point of kind of just that experience, it's just using cannabis as an example, it's fascinating because I'm a veteran in the Navy. Etienne, I know you're a veteran too, bless your soul. I've worked with a lot of veterans over the years to help kind of reframe their experience with cannabis, because, there's this thing that can happen if you don't come to cannabis correct. It can slap you in a way that, it creates such a negative response that you might not ever do it again. And so there's a lot of people that are first time users that, take some long break in between that start back, or people that kind of one day it just shifts from taking way too big of a dose, but it's kind of a respect and kind of set and setting type factor, but it'll create a super negative reaction that, kind of leads to this, oh, maybe it's not for me anymore, and you hear all these different people that say, oh, the cannabis these days is so strong. It's and part of it is, kind of immediately start microdosing THC and, having really elevated levels of CBD or say CBG or something. But then it's the whole kind of the ritual of like taking a bud and grinding it up and, kind of, going through the process of rolling it, and starting kind of almost set your endogenous path kind of forward with it. And, kind of then, kind of taking that, that you rolled ritually in that way, or whatever the ritual is that you do with it, but it's putting the intention into it in that way. And then it's doing something that's associatively pleasurable, like going and eating, favorite dessert, or going on a walk with your sweetie, or going kind of, out in the water, or whatever it is that, you like. But, and then over time with cannabis, kind of from this protocol, you can kind of over time, like keeping this ritual going, the same process, kind of over time, you can start eventually slowly titrating up your THC that's in that blend. And then all of a sudden you're able to puff tough with the best of them, like, and start to really shift your experience with cannabis to appreciate and enjoy THC and all the medicine it brings, and so I think kind of that's such a big process with, how we're, it's like I used to do a lot of bud tender educational seminars at retail dispensaries, and I would almost like I try to lecture them about like, how sacred of a role and act it is to be able to be this person to help share this experience with somebody that's new, that's never done it before, and how if you do that wrong, that could be on your karma, because you might have like just dabbed out that old lady, or like just blasted them on that like Chiba Chew 1,000 milligram edible, that they might not ever smoke cannabis, because again, even though it might have been in their destiny to heal their cancer with this plant, that you just did that, dude, so take that responsibly. And so just like kind of that understanding with cannabis, I think goes triple so with kind of all these like new kind of emerging and these plants, and yeah, just not taking it, not taking it for granted and taking it seriously, just in, how we do it, and just the reverence we do it in, and just knowing, what we're doing it.
Hey, happy belated Armistice Day to you. I don't consider it Veterans Day because that's more propaganda for the industrial military complex, but happy
Likewise.
Armistice Day belated
My
and
brother.
respect. But with the veterans that we're working with, we all consider cannabis our daily palliative because, we have a daily acclimatization to it, and after 30 days, arriving at regular cognitive levels, whereas we see psychedelics and mushroom as the next front for our veterans to really hit at the deep issues, even microdosing and working with therapists and psychologists to work through their post-traumatic stress injury. It's no longer PTSD, people. That's considered post-traumatic stress damage. It is an injury. So that's why it's called PTSI now, so that we can realize that we can heal past these injuries once we have the proper tools and tool sets in mind. And we're finding a lot of psychologists willing to now step over that line to work with psychedelics to help a lot of these people access their deeper traumas through psychedelics. So it's a new and beautiful frontier. So if you're out there in psychology now, look into this new front so that you can educate yourself and become one of those therapists, because there's millions of people who need psychedelic healing, not just our veterans. We're just a small subset, or trying to prove fact as the culture that we are, and we are establishing that, and we're doing so that the larger society in general can benefit from it. Much love.
I love it, Etienne. Thank you for sharing that. It's funny because I've been kind of bubbling about trying to do a show more based on this psychedelic conversation. And I've been talking to a business partner of mine who runs an account called Inoculate the World and Inoculate the West. His name is Drew. Super awesome guy, deep in the mushroom world. And we're sort of trying to put together a hash church, mushroom church kind of version, a mushroom dialogue or a psychedelic dialogue, more so than just mushrooms. So some of you for sure will have to get invited to that. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. It is noon now, so we've been rocking it for 3 hours, and my son Tanner is like anxious to go, maybe pick mushrooms or go play or something. So we're going to go do that. But yeah, it was awesome to see all of you and hear all of your voices, and I really enjoyed the conversation today. I want to thank the 300 plus people that watched and sort of streamed along with us the entire time, and we're in the chat the entire time, keeping dialogue going on in there. So did I freeze? I froze.
Button.
I needed to wrap it up. I needed that Dave Chappelle. Wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Love you all.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, blessings.
Peace and love.
Peace.
Good, everybody.
Tons of hash.
Exactly.